cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 20th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood. I'm at the Reform UK Party conference today, where leader Nigel Farage will be among the speakers at the two-day event. It gets underway here in Birmingham.
Good stuff. We'll be catching up with Tom throughout the show. And Starmer, he's in turmoil. A civil war brews in number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own. And losing our Englishness. Robert Jenrick has today warned that mass immigration and woke culture have put England's national identity at risk. He's going to be with us live. So, as you can tell, there's a huge amount going on today. We're going to be reporting live from the Reform Conference with Tom Harwood. There, of course, we are. We're also going to be speaking to Robert Jenrick about his punchy piece in the Daily Mail. Tom, what do you see is going to happen at the conference today? We've got a few speeches from the key contenders. What time's Nigel Farage up?
Yeah, I've just been down to the main hall where these speeches take place. I have to say, it's a pretty impressive setup. It's so large, there's a double-decker bus there next to the stage and huge raked seating. Nigel Farage is a little bit later this afternoon, but things are kicking off around about now. There are all of the MPs speaking, of course, 5 that they elected in the last general election, but also, of course, other voices too. You've got a chap from the SAS, Anne Widdecombe will be about as well. There's lots going on here, and we're at the heart of it.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you, Tom. We'll check in with you in a little bit. Please do get in touch if you're at home watching. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But let's get the news headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. One of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims, who went by the name Natasha, has told a press conference the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. He was described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods by lawyers representing 37 alleged victims of sexual assault at that press conference in London today. Dean Armstrong KC said the case combines some of the most horrific elements of those including Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Natasha described Al-Fayed as a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss, his hands gripping your face to his lips, or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Renee Moudet and sister were both murdered by Ms Moudet's ex-partner in 2018, says those calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Reneem's law to transform the way the police handle cases of violence against women and girls. An inquest found mistakes made by West Midlands Police have materially contributed to Ms O'Day and Ms Salim's deaths. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government will ensure that things change.
Victims of domestic abuse need to know that the police will be there for them in an emergency. That didn't happen for Rani Muda when she lost her life, and that's why we're bringing domestic abuse experts into 999 control rooms like this to make sure that the emergency response is right. We saw when Rani Muda called 999 4 times on the night she was killed, no one came. We cannot let that happen again. So we'll begin with the first wave, then we want to roll this out right across the country so that domestic abuse victims can know the police will be there for them when they call.
In other news, the Foreign Secretary last night demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the militant group Hezbollah after meeting allies in Paris. David Lammy is chairing meetings today on the evacuation of Britons from Lebanon following Israeli airstrikes. Israel carried out further strikes on southern Lebanon overnight, saying its warplanes hit more than 100 Hezbollah rocket launchers and other terrorist sites. The Israel Defense Forces said the launchers were ready to be fired against Israel. It wasn't immediately clear if there were any casualties. Lebanon's state-run national news agency said Israel carried out at least 52 strikes in the south of the country last night, and that Lebanon had also launched strikes on military sites in northern Israel. Earlier, the leader of the terrorist group Hezbollah said deadly explosions earlier in the week crossed all red lines, accusing Israel of what he said represented a declaration of war. Israel has not said it was behind the attacks, which saw pagers and walkie-talkies explode across the country, and which Lebanese authorities said killed 37 people and wounded 3,000. Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims that the ties bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Jenrick says immigration has had a clear impact on our culture, customs and cohesion. Mr Jenrick also suggested it's a contributing factor to this summer's riots, with unrest spreading across the country in the wake of the Southport knife attack which killed 3 young girls. And thunderstorms and lightning are set to batter the UK, with up to 70 millimetres of rainfall expected within a few hours after a spell of dry, warm weather. The Met Office has issued 2 yellow weather warnings for thunderstorms for today and tomorrow and said damage to buildings as a result of lightning strikes, disruption to public transport and flooding should be expected within the affected areas. Today's alert covers most of the southwest of England, parts of Wales, the Midlands and West London, and is in place from now until 8 o'clock. The second warning is in place all of tomorrow from 1 a.m. and covers all of Wales and southwest England, the Midlands and parts of southeast England. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 12:07. Now, today is the first day of Reform UK's annual conference. Nigel Farage is expected to issue a clarion call for change when he makes his keynote speech a little bit later on this afternoon. Now, the party is also expected to unveil its plan to win the 2029 general election following its strong performance in July, where the party gained 5 MPs and became the third biggest party in terms of vote share. They're very much hoping to build on that, and this all comes a day after Nigel Farage announced he would be relinquishing control of the party and giving ownership back to the party's members. OK, well, to tell us more is Tom Harwood, who's on the ground. Tom, please do tell us more. Is there a little bit of a battle going on behind the scenes when it comes to the party structure, its constitution and all of that?
Well, I was talking to some senior people in and around Nigel Farage's team last night, and I have to say it does seem like there was a bit of wrangling. There has been a bit of wrangling over what the party constitution should look like. How will the party be going forward? How will it professionalise? How will it democratise? After all, Nigel Farage became leader by a bloodless coup, one could say. Nigel Farage just asserting that he, as the majority shareholder of the company, could be leader, and there it was. So there are democratising reforms taking place. Here to tell us a little bit more is Christopher Hope, our political editor. Because, Chris, we were talking about this a bit last night. The new reforms will see party members be able to choose new leaders and even remove the current leader.
Hi, Tom. That's right. It's quite an important thing that is. It's the rule book which underlies this party. It's a company at the moment. Nigel Farage owns 8 out of 15 shares, and that's not appropriate for a party which pretends and says it wants to form a government in 2029. So it's turning into a party limited by guarantee. That means that members will get a stake in it. If more than half those members, and there's currently 80,000 of them, want a vote of no confidence in the leader, they can ask the board to vote on that. So there's a degree of democracy in it, not a lot, but some, and about as much as you have in the Tories or Labour Party.
And interestingly, there's a bit of ambition in this constitution as well. It says if the party has more than 100 MPs, then MPs themselves could force a vote of no confidence.
If more than half vote for it, so quite similar to where you have with the Tory party, although it's 15% in that case, but even so, half of 100 is quite a big number. That ambition, though, is barely scratching the surface with Nigel Farage. He's just arrived behind me at the conference, and he's told me just now for GB News, and the clip will play out shortly on the channel, he thinks his party can win in 2029. I said, come off it, Nigel. 5 MPs to 326 MPs, is that even possible? He thinks that we are looking at a once-in-a-century event in 2029 and not seen, well, for a long time.
That is an extraordinary level of bravado. Of course, we've seen parties rise and fall in the history of the United Kingdom before. Never have we seen a party go from one electoral cycle to the next, 5 MPs to 326.
Yeah, in a sense, I mean, behind you there's a sweet stand over there. There's a kind of sugar rush happening here amongst these members. They can't believe they've got 5 MPs from 0 MPs back in July. They arrive here, they want selfies with GB News colleagues. You've been asked, I've been asked for pictures with them. There's a feeling of optimism, and I think, you know, you can almost forgive Farage for being quite excited. But when it might be difficult, that. I mean, he's got to get councillors elected next May, some AMs in the Welsh Parliament, some MSPs in Scotland, and build this force he's trying to do. But we're at the ground level, and the first step is sorting out the rule book, the party's plumbing, and that's what's been happening over the night.
And that is such a foundational step.
Correct.
If they want to professionalise the party. You've been coming to these sort of conferences for a long time. You went to them in the UKIP days when Nigel Farage led that party. How does this feel different compared to that?
It's professionalised. I mean, back then it did feel a bit eccentric. Some, I mean, great people, but eccentric people, but good people all the same. This is much more professional. I think you're seeing people come up to you who are normal people from around the country. GB News viewers, many of them, are saying, I just can't say what I think. This party allows me to do it. 4,000 members arriving here. We're in the NEC. Other parties have their events in cities, easily accessible for corporates, bosses, lobbyists, along with members. This is aimed squarely at membership, and that's why I think gives it a kind of a real vibrancy which you don't get in the other parties when they have their events.
And this is interesting because we're of course heading to the Labour Party conference in just a day's time. I was expecting that potentially just 2 months after a landslide electoral victory in the House of Commons, that the Labour Party might be feeling on cloud nine, that they'd be cheering and whooping their way back into government after 14 years in the wilderness. I get the sense, though, from people I'm speaking to in the Labour Party, that it's not a victory lap that we'll get in 2 days' time. And actually, if anything, the party that only won 5 MPs feels a lot more confident in itself.
Yes, I mean, both parties were probably surprised by what happened to them. I guess Labour, now they're in power, they're almost kind of thinking, gosh, it's quite hard doing it. The choices they've made already have been quite divisive, not least on the winter fuel allowance. And only 1 in 5 of all adults voted for this government, of course, so it's hardly a kind of coronation of everyone wanting this government in post. It is surprising, I think, and I think they'll try and change that mood music probably after the budget. And there's some polling today saying that people are feeling quite gloomy about the country. Well, no surprise, given the language coming out from this government.
Do you think that's why Nigel Farage told you just some minutes ago, as you walked in, and the reaction he got was, of course, as you'd expect. This is, some people describe this party as a personality cult. I suppose that's why they're trying to move away from it with the democratising reforms. But do you get the sense that this is actually that moment that Nigel's told you about, that once-in-a-100-year moment where things feel in flux, where the old parties risk actually falling away completely?
It is possible. The parties, as they stand, are protected by the electoral reform system, which rewards parties with long corporate memories, knows where the members are, have lots of data. If we went to a PR system, which was an option, how we had been in a hung parliament with the Lib Dems supporting it, then I think what Farage is saying is much more possible, but he's got a hell of a challenge. The problem with reform is they don't know where the supporters are. They just by force of personality of Farage, social media, anger with the Tory party, gave them those 5 MPs. But they won't have that in 2029. The Tories will be organised. They'll be trying to chase down some of those 4 million voters who backed reform back in the election. We're seeing Robert Jenrick today talking again, really targeting those people concerned about immigration and the like. And I think you'll see more of that. So it was a perfect storm to win just 5 MPs. You need a hurricane to win more than 325, which would give them a majority in Parliament.
It is typical of Nigel Farage to make these big, grandiose gestures to say we're going to sweep into government in just 5 years' time. He also said coming up to this election he'd get 6 or 7 million votes. In the end, he got 4 million votes.
Yes.
I mean, still an impressive total, the 3rd highest number of votes of any party, but it was equivalent to what UKIP was able to do in 2015.
With 1 MP.
Is there a risk that with all of the analysis that we're doing and looking at the spectacle here, that we overhype reform's prospects? Because ultimately, is this more of a successor organisation to UKIP than something particularly new?
That's right. So is it UKIP Mark II or Conservatives Mark III? That's the question. And they want to be the new Conservative Party and take away that support. But the system is weighted against them in this country. And I think the Kool-Aid is being drunk. There's a taxi behind us with the new reform branding. There's a bus inside the arena you'll be seeing later on GBNews. So there's a real excitement here, I think, about this party. But whether that will turn into votes is a different question and a real challenge. He knows that, but this is really, I think, Farage's last hurrah. He's going to go really hard into 2029 and give it one last shot. One last shot, although it is 5 years away. Well, Emily, there is so much going on at this conference. We're going to bring you as much of it as we can. And I'm going to be having a little walk around in just a little while to show you more of what is going on here at the Birmingham NEC.
Oh, I'm looking forward to your world-famous walk-arounds, Tom. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to Christopher Hope. We'll check in with you a little bit later. So a big, ambitious goal for Nigel Farage and his party to win the next general election in 2029. So lots of work to do, but we'll be going back to the conference. But we're going to turn our attention to the government for a moment, because the Labour peer, Lord Ali, well, he's donated over $300,000 to senior Labour ministers, including Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, over nearly 2 decades. So, yes, the money not only going to Keir Starmer, which we knew about with the wardrobe upgrades and the spectacles and all of that, but other cabinet ministers were in on it, contributions increasing under Starmer's leadership. Yes, the Prime Minister, he received over $155,000, while the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, got $72,000. Rayner also welcomed the new year in a £2 million Manhattan apartment owned by Lord Ali for 5 nights. Raising questions about gift declarations amid Labour's cronyism row. Well, joining me now is political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. Quite striking to read that 7 Labour cabinet ministers have taken donations from this one Labour peer and donor.
Yes, you're right, Emily. I mean, this shows, I think, that Lord Ali's support is not clearly based around the magic or alleged magic of Keir Starmer, but actually it's a long-standing and wide-reaching series of donations he's made. I think it was striking that looking at the individual years at which Lord Ali was making his donations, they sort of dried up largely during the Corbyn years when obviously a lot of people turned away. But of course, as soon as Keir Starmer looked like he was going to bring the party in a much more centrist direction and make them actually much more electable, then of course the money taps were turned on once again. So I think this is a really interesting question about kind of the level at which it's sort of you're a peer, you're a Labour parliamentarian, but also you're offering the use of your house both to the Labour deputy leader, Angela Rayner, and of course allowing the now Prime Minister to plot his election campaign in his London house too. So a really interesting question around the nexus of influence and cash and long-standing interest that surrounds Keir Starmer and the members of his front bench that now are in the cabinet.
And questions over just how comfortable they all felt taking money and trips from this one man. I mean, he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart, I don't imagine. Or is he, James? Just a nice guy?
I think there's a bit of both in that. I think Lord Ali's conviction for Labour is genuine and long-rooted, but I also think that it's fair to say that this is someone who Labour gave a peerage in the late 1990s, someone who obviously clearly was given a number 10 pass to Downing Street as well. And this is someone who obviously enjoys considerable influence. He's planning post-election parties, was involved in this so-called Operation Integrity within government. I mean, they couldn't make a more ironically named operation if they tried. But I think it shows a really interesting question of which what Keir Starmer was saying in 2021, 2022 when he was trying
this morning, and the likes of Angela Eagle the other day to have to answer all these questions relating to what Keir Starmer's received in gifts and donations. It's very awkward indeed when they were all very pious during the Boris Johnson years when it came to gifts that he'd accepted, not least the wallpaper. But there's a little bit of confusion, isn't there, over Angela Rayner and this use of Lord Ali's luxury $2.5 million New York penthouse overlooking Manhattan, because according to her parliamentary declaration, she put that the stay was worth about £1,250. Now, I haven't been to New York, but I imagine a very expensive Manhattan flat was probably worth a little more than that for a few nights' stay.
Well, of course, you may remember earlier this year the Scott Benton scandal when the former Blackpool South MP was filmed on camera saying that lots of MPs register stuff as being worth less than £300 because £300 is the minimum amount you have to register to kind of put a donation forward in the register. So I think that Angela Rayner, this £1,250, I mean, that is a very good rate, shall we say. So either she's a very savvy operator or perhaps the figures are not quite what you'd get on the market rate, perhaps.
You'd be lucky to get a Premier Inn for that on New Year's Eve, I would say, the spiking of the dynamic pricing of these hotels and things. But just lastly, James, what should Keir Starmer do? Because he's sort of defended these gifts and donations. He suggested that he'll continue to take them. Nothing to see here. When it came to the football tickets, well, of course, he can't go into the stands because that would cost the taxpayer for all the security needs and all of that, etc. But does he need to change the way he responds to these allegations, these accusations?
I think so, and it's not just us saying this, of course. It's in the press. It's, Harriet Harman, Baroness Harman, came out today and saying you need to stop apologising and just get on and change your behaviour in future. I think the big mistake that Starmer and his team have made about all of this is they think that, the Tories were doing it for years and now it's us. Well, sorry, you asked to be judged on a different standard. Of course, the voters have just swept away the Conservatives by a huge majority at the election. So I think that they need to realise that voters have a certain idea about what Keir Starmer was promising when he came into office, and they need to stick to that. And I think that going forward, at a time when you're making decisions like the winter fuel allowance, it would be best to avoid suggesting anything that you're prioritising either a section interest like the unions, or we're doing anything that you're taking with one hand and giving with another. So I think they've got to be very careful in future because these stories are not spending their political capital, they're squandering it.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. James Heal, political correspondent at The Spectator magazine. Good to speak to you. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. I don't know if you've seen, but government borrowing is spiralling out of control. Debt has hit 100% of national income for the first time since the 1960s. Stay with us.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest is a composer and film director whose musical journey began at the tender age of 4.5 when he started playing the piano. Under the tutelage of luminaries such as Sir George Benjamin and Sir Harrison Birtwistle, he has honed his craft, primarily grounding himself in the classical world. He's written music in sets of composition in the 24 major and minor keys of the chromatic scale, producing an album which is accompanied by 24 videos, and it's called 24. I'm joined now by Fabio D'Andrea. Fabio, great to see you. Tell me a little bit, I'm a layman when it comes to music, tell me a little bit about how a composer chooses a key and what it means to the composer to have chosen the key.
Sure. Well, I think every musical key, and there's 24 of them, major and minor, they have their own feel. So you could play a piece in, say, C major, which is normally regarded as the simple key, it's all the white notes on the piano. But if you play that piece, say, in A-flat major, it's going to have a very different feel. So I decided to create this project, 24 pieces, again, looking back at our traditions and the history of what composers have done in the past, especially in regards to piano music, and explore every key, see if I could bring out the emotion that you feel from that actual key itself.
Were you fonder of some than others? I imagine, for example, you're not so fond of C because it's too straightforward.
Actually, no, I love all of them. And that's the beauty of music. Every key has its own feel. And some keys are associated with different feelings. So, for example, C major has actually been historically associated with victory. It's quite a victorious feel about it. I love D-flat major. That's quite mellow. But every key has its own special feeling. And sometimes something will just sound different in that one key, and it's meant to be in that key. So for me, this has been a whole exploration of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It is now 12:25, and the latest figures reveal that government borrowing in August reached its highest level for the month since the height of the COVID pandemic in 2021. So, borrowing, lots of figures here. Borrowing rose to £13.7 billion last month, £3.3 billion more than in August last year. So, explaining the figures, the Office for National Statistics said that while tax income had grown strongly, this was outweighed by increased spending on benefits and public services, including those public sector pay rises. OK, so let's get the thoughts now with macroeconomist Philip Pilkington. Philip, thank you very much indeed for your time. I mean, the headline that debt has hit 100% of national income for the first time since the 1960s. Alarm bells?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, look, Labour, when they were coming into government, even during the campaign, did communicate to the public that the public finances were pretty bad. I don't think they were quite honest about how bad they were, and I don't think they were honest that they were going to get in and impose probably the harshest austerity that the country's seen since the 1950s after World War II. I don't think they told people that. And I think basically that's the problem that they're having, that they kind of communicated that the situation was quite bad, but they didn't say it was very bad. And so on the one hand, they're kind of making cuts to winter fuel allowances and so on, which are obviously very difficult to do, especially for a Labour government. But on the other hand, they're giving pay rises to public sector workers. So they clearly haven't found the right balance to achieve the goals that they're willing to achieve. And I think this is also explains why Keir Starmer's absolutely tanking in the polls, to be honest.
Well, yeah, it does seem that there's austerity for some, i.e. pensioners, but not for others, including train drivers, I guess. It's also been said that Rachel Reeves has suddenly a £10 billion windfall, and therefore she could U-turn on this winter fuel allowance decision that will hit pensioners so hard this winter. What's the calculation behind that 10 billion windfall? Is there one?
I seriously doubt it. The OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which kind of tracks public finances, they're a semi-independent body, and they put out a report 2 weeks ago, and the headline of the report basically was that unless something drastically changes, Britain is going to go from 100% of GDP, which we hit this month, to 270% of GDP in 2070. So nearly 3 times the income, the annual income of the country. And what the OBR is communicating to the public and to the politicians is effectively that there's going to be austerity for a very long time. There's going to be cuts to government for a very, very long time. And I think basically this was, I mean, I'm speculating, but I think this was communicated to the Labour government to some extent before, while they're running, and then it was put on their desk when they came in, probably. And so I don't really buy that there's 10 billion left of space. I mean, maybe they can show it by doing some creative accounting, but if they're facing then this overall serious problem, then it's really, they're going to have to be looking to save pennies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if a year from now we're talking about that they're doing things that they've actually said that they won't do, like raising capital gains tax and so on. They might even be pushed at some point to raise taxes on workers, which they've explicitly said that they won't do. So my assumption is that they're going to have to do a lot of things that they don't want to do, and it's going to prove very unpopular in the next 2 years.
Yeah, there's lots of talks of inheritance tax, changes to ISAs, which a lot of people have invested money in, changes to savings, changes to pensions, all sorts of things that could be coming down the line. But, Philip, just back to basics, why is having a high national debt a bad thing? Because you do hear from some left-wing economists that actually we don't need to worry about debt.
Yeah, so the argument there is basically that if you have your own currency, the Bank of England can always buy the debt. And in a sense, that's true. But the issue is that if foreign purchasers sell the debt, because Britain runs a trade deficit, a very large trade deficit, if foreign investors get spooked and sell the debt, it can put massive pressure on sterling. And if sterling value falls, import prices go up and inflation goes up, because 30%, roughly speaking, 30% of goods bought and sold in the United Kingdom are imports, because it's an island economy. It imports a lot from Europe, it imports a lot from the United States. And so the people who are saying that the Bank of England can engage in kind of QE to infinity, I think they have kind of Japan in mind. Well, Japan has a huge trade sector and runs a big current account surplus, so they can actually kind of monetize the debt. But for Britain, it's very difficult because if external buyers don't buy, as I said, the sterling will fall, and that doesn't just mean your holiday becomes more expensive. It means a third of the things on the shelf become more expensive. And I think the Treasury and the Bank of England are aware of this, which is why they don't try the mad money policies.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking us through all of that. Philip Pilkington, macroeconomist. Thank you very much indeed. The government have been talking down our economy since that speech, rather miserable speech that Keir Starmer gave us all, telling us that things were going to get worse before they got better. And just reading here that household confidence in the economy, consumer confidence, has plunged. Go figure. It's hardly surprising, is it? Are we putting off investment? Are we encouraging people to up sticks and leave if they've got a bit of money, if they've got business interests and the like? I do worry about the state of things. Then you see our national debt spiralling just when Labour have been in power for 2 months. Austerity 2.0, but not for public sector workers, it would seem. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to be checking in with Tom Harwood, who is, of course, at the Reform Conference. It's all gearing up for some punchy speeches, I imagine, but that's after your news.
Good afternoon. The top stories. One of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims, who went by the name Natasha, has told a press conference today that the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. He was described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods by lawyers representing 37 alleged victims of sexual abuse at that press conference in London. Dean Armstrong KC said the case combined some of the most horrific elements of those including Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Natasha described Al-Fayed as a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss. His hands gripping your face to his lips, or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Raneem O'Day and sister were both murdered by Miss O'Day's ex-partner in 2018. She says those calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Raneem's law to transform the way police handle cases of violence against women and girls. An inquest found mistakes made by West Midlands Police had materially contributed to the deaths. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government will ensure that things change. And Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Jenrick says immigration has had a clear impact on our culture, customs and cohesion. Mr Jenrick's also suggested it's a contributing factor to this summer's riots, with unrest spreading across the country in the wake of the Southport knife attack which killed 3 young girls. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dry Friday for most, but we are going to see some big thunderstorms across parts of the south. The sunniest skies probably in western Scotland. That's because we've got high pressure sitting to the north and generally an easterly wind. So with some shelter, say western Scotland doing OK for sunshine, but also much of Northern Ireland and northwest England. Further south, things are brightening up. We've got some sunny spells, but that is sparking a few showers. Much of northeast England and eastern Scotland staying pretty drab. The showers in the south intensifying this afternoon and some rumbles of thunder, lightning flashes and hailstones are likely. Temperatures in the sunnier spells in the south getting into the low 20s. On the cool side, though, on these North Sea coasts where it stays fairly drab and a little drizzly with a brisk wind. Now, this is the thunderstorm warning area. Not everywhere in this area will see the thunderstorms. They will be hit and miss, but the potential for those thunderstorms to cause some problems. Certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Further north, well, it's a fine Friday across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, staying pretty drab in eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England, where the cloud will be thick enough for a little drizzle here and there. But the heaviest rain in those thundery showers across parts of the south and west will slowly fade as we go through this evening. For many, it'll be a fine Friday night, but notice further south, we are starting to import further heavy showers as we go through the early hours, and they could also cause some disruption during Saturday. A fairly mild night for most, with some clearer skies In western Scotland, temperatures well down into single digits. But again, here on Saturday, a fine day. But again, in the south, we do need to watch out for thunderstorms. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones, torrential downpours possible, could cause some flooding. And again, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Won't rain all day. There will be somewhat hit and miss. And in the sunny spells, again in the south, it will feel quite warm. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
On the southbound side of the M1, there's a lane closure to a broken down vehicle from 40 through to 39 for Wakefield. Traffic is coping well. Very slow though for the eastbound side of the M58. It is currently closed to an overturned vehicle between Upholland at junction 5 through to the Orrell interchange at junction 26. Delays at junction 4. Clockwise on the M25, severe delays and 2 lanes closed to a lorry fire just before Godston at junction 6. Delays at junction 5. It is also looking extra slow as it's a roadwork area. Anti-clockwise on the M25, there's also severe delays and a lane closure due to an accident. That is just before South Mims at junction 23. Delays at Enfield at junction 25. And that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:38, and that means it's time to have a catch-up with Tom Harwood, who is at the Reform Conference up in Birmingham. Tom, bring us the latest.
Yes, well, it's all got underway at 12 o'clock. This conference started. I've got my hands on the official conference guide here, which I can show you actually means that we are currently in the middle of the Welcome to Conference. No, we're in the middle of James McMurdoch, who of course was the unexpected MP. The MP who was elected down in Basildon unexpectedly and late. If we remember on the election night, what happened was that 4 Reform MPs were elected. There was Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, Richard Tice and Lee Anderson, and it wasn't until the next morning that they discovered that, lo and behold, someone that they hadn't expected would be elected was indeed elected. So he's kicking off the roster today, and then after that it's Anne Widdecombe who is up on the stage. It's all going to culminate at 4 o'clock with Nigel Farage, but lots of other people speaking in between. But this isn't just about who is speaking. This is about a party that is attempting to professionalise, attempting to modernise. We can see on our screen Nigel Farage arriving at the Birmingham NEC just some moments ago, being swamped with supporters, even though at this point the supporters had all been told to go to the stand, to go to the arena to hear the speeches. Some people, of course, stayed behind and wanted to say hello to Nigel as he snuck into what he hoped would be a bit of an empty hall. But clearly this is a moment for this party that won 5 members of Parliament at the general election, 14% of the vote. The new chairman of Reform UK is a guy called Zia Youssef. Now, he has been telling delegates today that things are on the up for Reform UK. They're polling at 18%, higher than the 14% they got at the election, and the membership, the number of members to this party has surpassed 80,000, according to the party chairman. Now, that means that this conference is the biggest conference the party or any of its forebears has held. We're expecting 4,000 people here at the Birmingham NEC over the course of today and tomorrow. The question for Reform UK, however, will be, can it live up to the hype? It's spoken a lot about professionalising, it's spoken a lot about growing its vote share. There'll be a big test in the local elections as to whether it can live up to those big expectations.
Absolutely, there are big expectations, and I must say it's a very attractive taxi behind you, all dressed up in the Reform colours and the Reform branding, very nice on your left shoulder. I don't know if you can shed any light on this, if you have any particular insight, but Nigel Farage, he's been doing quite a few media interviews recently, and it's been commented upon that he's not doing in-person surgeries down at Clacton. Nigel Farage said that's because of security concerns. He went as far as to say that the Speaker's office had warned him against having these in-person surgeries. He cited what happened in Southend to the MP there, David Amis. Any insight on where we are with that one?
Yeah, as far as I understand, that is the case. The Speaker's office does issue recommendations to members of Parliament. We've heard the stories before about how members of Parliament have had security alarms installed in their homes. Some, of course, have been issued security. Nigel Farage's security has increased markedly in recent months. He's gone from just having 2 bodyguards around him to having many, many more. And of course, it does seem that it is on official recommendation that he doesn't host these in-person walk-in surgeries, simply due to the security situation around that. And of course, that's a sad indictment in terms of where we are as a country, that members of Parliament who are seen to be on that higher risk register can't interact with people in the way that perhaps they would have done several decades ago. I know that Nigel Farage loves nothing more than going out into crowds and meeting people, and to some extent that's why we've seen some of these attacks on him, whether it was rubble being thrown at him on the Reform bus or a milkshake being thrown at his face in his own constituency. We have seen that against Nigel Farage in a way that we haven't seen against other party leaders. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is that he does like to get out there amongst people. There was a curious case of a Rishi Sunak impersonator around 6 months ago who got egged in the street because someone thought that it was actually Rishi Sunak. Which perhaps tells you that if these other politicians had been doing these walkabouts as much as Nigel Farage, perhaps they would also have had the egg thrown at them in the way that he's had the milkshake thrown at him. Of course, Ed Miliband had an egg thrown at him on a walkabout in and around Doncaster in 2014 or 15. Many politicians have, over the course of recent years, had things thrown at them, not least John Prescott, who had a punch thrown at him famously in the 2001 general election, although the bigger scandal there perhaps is that he returned it. But yes, I mean, to return to the point, there does seem to be a serious level of security concern, particularly around Nigel Farage, and his security has been increased.
And just lastly, Tom, while I've got you, we're going to be speaking to Robert Jenrick a little bit later. He's one of the Tory leadership hopefuls, of course. He's got a bit of a blistering piece in the Daily Mail today about how mass immigration and woke culture are undermining English national identity. Do you think the timing of that piece has anything to do with the Reform Party conference kicking off today?
Oh, a cynic might suggest so, and a cynic would be entirely right. I mean, Robert Jenrick really does want to win back the 4 million people who voted for Reform UK in the last election. He sees the path to Conservative victory through winning back a huge number of those who voted for the Reform Party, as well as, of course, the huge number of people who sat on their hands and stayed at home as well. We saw turnout decrease at the last general election, which is another big issue, but it is clear, and one of the big battlegrounds will be for the sort of centre-right voter. You've got this party and some of those candidates vying to lead the Conservative Party, chasing after that pool of voters. I think we're going to see quite a lot of that from Robert Jenrick. It will be interesting to get his view on Nigel Farage, his view on what's going on in Birmingham today.
Well, we'll certainly put it to him. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood, there at the Reform Party UK conference. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, including a very curious one. A Cornish town's long-held tradition of lifting school children and bumping their heads on turf-topped boundary stones has been halted. Guess why? Health and safety. Stay tuned.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Charlie. And this is about Anglican Church, the Church of England, dropping the word church in favour of something a bit more modern sounding. Words such as community. Why are we afraid of the word church?
Well, that's my question. I mean, you've got to assume that they think it solves some kind of problem. But I think, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about their particular religious institution, whatever they all have different names, don't they? And if you rename one, do you have to rename all of them? Can we no longer use an individual name for different religions, community buildings?
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You sound like him. Yeah.
No, certainly.
Oh, don't get any started on me.
Do I believe in a God? Yes. Do I believe in any of the particular gods that are offered to us? Still undecided.
I'm like you. I said exactly that.
You two are the same. You two are exactly.
What about you, Anna? Are you particularly religious?
Well, I'm not a proper religious. I won't name myself as a religious, but I really do respect religions. And we have bigger problems to think about.
Is it a sign of where we're at in this secular society?
Yes.
We're moving more and more towards that. The Anglican Church feels that the only way to be relevant is to take away any reference to church going, to being religious.
I think if the substance of what you're offering is good, it doesn't matter what it's called. So if people are going to find solace and peace in a place that makes them feel better, they're not going to care too much about what it's called. So I think relabeling it, rebranding it, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but it's going to certainly upset a lot of people, I should think.
And people whose religion is important to them and kind of central to their lives, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
There's a reason Justin Welby is nicknamed by some quarters the Archbishop of Woke. Maybe this adds fuel to the fire, who knows?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:49. Now, health and safety is bringing an end to a Cornish tradition that dates back to the rule of Queen Elizabeth I. Yes, beating the bounds. This sees school children given a tour of the boundary stones before being lifted and gently bounced on some turf placed on top of them. But now this is all at risk as a local town council in Helston unanimously voted to ban the event due to safeguarding concerns. Joining us now is political commentator Anna McGovern to tell us a bit more. Anna, is this a case of health and safety gone mad, or is this a rather bizarre tradition?
No, I do absolutely think it's a case of health and safety gone completely mad. And what I'm seeing so much more now is that traditions that we hold so closely to are just slowly being stripped away further and further with all of this red tape that continuously keeps being put in place. I think it's been a huge part of our history. And the fact that they've now voted to stop a tradition that so many people in the local community appreciate so much, I think is absolutely mad.
The Cornish are vehemently proud of their traditions. I mean, there are some Cornish people who want to be totally independent from the rest of England and the United Kingdom, or so I've heard. But yes, it doesn't seem that this would actually hurt a child because there's a bit of turf, it's on top of the stones, and the children are lifted into a horizontal position by adults who can carry their weight, and they're just sort of bumped onto the turf. I mean, it's not something I did as a child, but my first impression is why not keep it going?
Yes, exactly. So I believe the child is actually held sideways, and then it's a gentle bump 3 times on the head. So it's not like they're being smashed together or anything like that. This is something that's been a tradition for a very long time, and they know what they're doing. So I think this is, again, another example where the council is just trying to have more control over people's lives. And I think, again, it just kind of represents what we're seeing the trend of in society with the government, where we're just seeing continuously more red tape just being put in place and just decimating fun.
Yeah, I mean, these councils, they do get involved in everything, don't they? So they unanimously voted at the Helston Town Council to recommend that lifting of individuals no longer be an accepted practice at the Beating the Boundaries event for health and safety and safeguarding reasons. I mean, I don't know if there were any examples of this going so terribly wrong that they must do it, or if they just didn't fancy it anymore. Maybe they were outsiders at the town council and they didn't know about this tradition so much. I don't know.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised, and I think, again, what we see. I remember the walkabout, like King Charles. That was recently. They're not using that term anymore because it might be offensive. That's when they were doing their tour in Australia, because it might be seen as offensive to some Indigenous people in the community. And again, that's another closely held tradition. It's like this woke culture is controlling our language, controlling our lives. We're seeing so many more councils now. They're releasing these language guides to people as well, where they tell people what is and what isn't appropriate to say. And again, I just think this is another example of government and council control, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's like they want to create work for themselves. Thank you very much indeed, Anna McGovern, political commentator. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I mean, just reading what some of the residents had to say. Claire McEwen, she says, it's a wonderful tradition and should be left alone. I remember beating the bounds as a kid, and it was a fantastic experience. Wonderful memories. I'll never forget where that boundary stone is. As far as I'm aware, there's been no long-term damage to my noggin either. I mean, please do let me know if you're from the area and you've taken part in this tradition. Would you be sad to see it go? Should the council just stay out of it unless something awful happens? And then couldn't you just ban that particular individual from doing it, taking part? Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to be heading back up to Birmingham for the Reform UK conference. Stay with us after the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dry Friday for most, but we are going to see some big thunderstorms across parts of the south. The sunniest skies probably in western Scotland. That's because we've got high pressure sitting to the north and generally an easterly wind. So with some shelter, say western Scotland doing OK for sunshine, but also much of Northern Ireland and northwest England. Further south, things are brightening up. We've got some sunny spells, but that is sparking a few showers. Much of northeast England and eastern Scotland staying pretty drab. The showers in the south intensifying this afternoon, and some rumbles of thunder, lightning flashes and hailstones are likely. Temperatures in the sunnier spells in the south getting into the low 20s. On the cool side, though, on these North Sea coasts where it stays fairly drab and a little drizzly with a brisk wind. Now, this is the thunderstorm warning area. Not everywhere in this area will see the thunderstorms. They will be hit and miss, but the potential for those thunderstorms to cause some problems. Certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Further north, well, it's a fine Friday across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, staying pretty drab in eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England, where the cloud will be thick enough for a little drizzle here and there. But the heaviest rain in those thundery showers across parts of the south and west will slowly fade as we go through this evening. For many, it'll be a fine Friday night, but notice further south, we are starting to import further heavy showers as we go through the early hours, and they could also cause some disruption during Saturday. A fairly mild night for most, with some clearer skies in western Scotland, temperatures well down into single digits. But again, here on Saturday, a fine day. But again, in the south, we do need to watch out for thunderstorms. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones, torrential downpours possible, could cause some flooding. And again, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Won't rain all day. There will be somewhat hit and miss. And in the sunny spells, again in the south, it will feel quite warm. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win a £36,000 secret salary in the latest Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Take a year off and keep it to yourself. You don't even need to tell the taxman, as it's totally tax-free. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
And feelings of stress and anxiety tend to be quite normal for a lot of kids. And if it's normal for the kids, then it affects the parents as well.
Well, it seems that our canine friends could be the cure after new research by the University of Bristol found that dogs are incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotions.
OK, how do we cheat into this? How can your doggy help your family handle stress during this time of the year? Let's go to the Director of Canine Affairs at Guide Dogs UK, Tim Stafford. Tim, we're talking about this as if it's a big revelation, but obviously, you know, a man like yourself, you're well used to this, and you can see when a dog is reacting. What form would that reaction take, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice when the science kind of confirms what most of us have known for a very long time. Our dogs become members of our family and they come very, very close to us. So it's no surprise that anything that goes on in the family is going to be detected and picked up by the dog. That can be changes in behaviours. It can certainly be the dogs watching our behaviours and starting to mirror those behaviours. But what this research says is that the dogs can actually smell our emotions. It's not just that they're responding to our behaviour changes, they're responding to our physiological changes as well, because we smell differently when we start to get anxious. So at this time, there's lots of changes in a lot of families' lives. Kids are going back to school, young people are going to university, parents are having to deal with all of the emotions attached to that. So it's no surprise that our dogs start to detect that too.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 20th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live here at the Reform UK Party Conference, where today leader Nigel Farage will be amongst the speakers as this two-day event gets underway here in Birmingham.
Fantastic stuff. And Starmer, he's in a bit of turmoil. A civil war is brewing in Number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own. And what of all those gifts? And losing our Englishness, Robert Jenrick has today warned that mass immigration and woke culture have put England's national identity at risk. He'll be with us live very soon. And Tom, tell us a little bit more about the Reform Party Conference while I've got you here. Has there been a good turnout? What's the buzz like, if there is one?
Well, Reform UK say that there are 4,000 people, up to 4,000 people at this conference today. They say they've got 80,000 members and that polls, opinion polls, now show an increase in the vote share. They got 14% at the general election. They now point to polls that show them at 18% or higher. They think they've got the momentum. Nigel Farage has been boasting about getting into government in just 5 years' time. It has to be said, there's a huge amount of optimism here at this party conference. What we have to work out as journalists is this optimism misplaced? How reality-based is this party? Still only 5 MPs, an impressive feat, of course, to get that bridgehead in Parliament, but just 5 members of Parliament out of 650. They've got a mountain to climb if they believe they're going to get into government. Now, this conference will be instituting democratic reforms to the party, an ability for party members to dislodge their leader, to elect a new one. That's a contentious point, but it's part of the professionalisation of this party. That's what they're attempting to do in what has been so far the largest and most professional party conference that Nigel Farage has headed up.
Very interesting indeed. Yes, our voting system is quite difficult to break through, isn't it? Thank you very much. We'll catch you a little bit later. gbnews.com/your say. Please do get in touch at home if you're watching the show this afternoon. But let's get the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top story, one of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims who went by the name of Natasha has told a press conference the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. He was described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods by lawyers representing 37 alleged victims of sexual abuse at that press conference in London. Dean Armstrong KC said the case combines some of the most horrific elements of those including Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Natasha described Al-Fayed as a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss. His hands gripping your face to his lips or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
The government has announced new plans to tackle domestic violence. A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Ranimu Day and sister were both murdered by Ms O'Day's ex-partner in 2018. And she says those calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Raneem's law to transform the way the police handle cases of violence against women and girls. An inquest found mistakes made by West Midlands Police had materially contributed to the deaths. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government will ensure that things change. The Foreign Secretary last night demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the militant group Hezbollah after meeting allies in Paris. David Lammy is chairing meetings today on the evacuation of Britons from Lebanon following Israeli airstrikes. Israel carried out further strikes on southern Lebanon overnight, saying its warplanes hit more than 100 Hezbollah rocket launchers and other terrorist sites. The Israel Defense Forces said the launchers were ready to be fired against Israel. It wasn't immediately clear if there were any casualties. Lebanon's state-run national news agency said Israel carried out at least 52 strikes in the south of the country last night and that Lebanon had also launched strikes on military sites in northern Israel. Earlier, the leader of the terrorist group Hezbollah said deadly explosions earlier in the week crossed all red lines, accusing Israel of what he said represented a declaration of war. Israel has not said it was behind the attacks, which saw pagers and walkie-talkies explode across the country, and which Lebanese authorities said killed 37 people and wounded 3,000.
Victims of domestic abuse need to know that the police will be there for them in an emergency. That didn't happen for Rani Muda when she lost her life, and that's why we're bringing domestic abuse experts into 999 control rooms like this to make sure that the emergency response is right. We saw when Rani Muda called 999 4 times on the night she was killed, no one came. We cannot let that happen again. So we'll begin with the first wave, then we want to roll this out right across the country. country so that domestic abuse victims can know the police will be there for them when they call.
That was the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, speaking there on the government who have announced new plans to tackle domestic violence. In other news, Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Jenrick says immigration has had a clear impact on our culture, customs and cohesion. Mr Jenrick's also suggesting it's a contributing factor to this summer's riots, with unrest spreading across the country in the wake of the Southport knife attack, which killed 3 young girls. And thunderstorms and lightning are set to batter the UK, with up to 70 millimetres of rainfall expected within a few hours after a spell of dry, warm weather. The Met Office has issued 2 yellow weather warnings for thunderstorms for today and tomorrow and said damage to buildings as a result of lightning strikes, disruption to public transport and flooding should be expected within the affected areas. Today's alert covers most of the southwest England, parts of Wales, the Midlands and West London, and is in place until 8 o'clock. The second warning is in place all of tomorrow from 1 a.m. and covers all of Wales, southwest England, the Midlands and parts of southeast England. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, welcome back to Good Afternoon, Britain. It is 1:08, and Anne Widdecombe, Richard Tice and Nigel Farage are among the keynote speakers at the Reform UK conference today. The leader of the party is expected to issue a clarion call for change when he addresses the party faithful a little bit later on this afternoon. Now, the party is also expected to unveil its plan to win the 2029 general election following its strong performance in July, where the party gained 5 MPs and became the 3rd biggest party in terms of vote share. But is that a realistic ambition? Let's cross over to Birmingham now and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, these are quite lofty ambitions for what was for a party that hasn't been around for all that long.
I mean, that's so right. They've got 5 MPs. To win a majority in the House of Commons, you need 326 MPs. So another, 321 MPs to go is a long shot. But Nigel Farage, on arrival here for the Reform UK conference, insists that his party can pull off a once-in-a-century shock and form the next government, beating the Tories out of sight, going where the Lib Dems are and becoming this party which can form a government. Extraordinary, but that's what he's saying. There's 4,000 members here of Reform UK at the NEC, and one new member is with me now. He is Christopher Hudson. Christopher, until 2 weeks ago, you were a Conservative councillor. Why have you joined Reform?
To get effective and positive change, Christopher, we need to give the people a voice on the boats, taxes, all the capital taxes. We really need to get back. I mean, this reminds me of a proper old conference from the 80s. It's positive. We need change, not change for its own sake, but positive changes on tax, on all the things we share.
But there's a sweet stand over the corner there, Christopher. Do you worry this party's on a sugar rush? It's like toddlers gobbling down cola bottles and running around how excited they all are when the real world goes, not going to happen, is it really?
Well, 4,000 is a very good start here today, and we've got 4 million people who turned out at the general election. You could say small beginnings. I think it's the people are ready for a change. People are not listening to them.
Yeah.
They are the masters, and we must listen to them, and they want change.
In terms of the change in your life, how long were you a Conservative member?
I joined as a young boy at 15 at university, and this reminds me back to Maggie's days of the early conferences then. There was a positive vibe.
So you've been a member since 2015.
Absolutely.
You are now older than that.
Absolutely.
Let's say it's 50 years later.
Yeah.
To be generous,
Time's moved on.
You're quitting. You're moving on.
Yes.
Emotional for you, I suppose.
Very emotional. But who was it who said, when the events on the floor change, I change my opinion?
But you're joining a party which essentially is a protest party, defining itself against the main parties. Is it a wasted vote you're doing here?
No, it's a little more than that, because it's the range of policies that are set out, and I await policies on local government, which I have a particular interest in as a county councillor. We we are now at the start of the journey, overused word, but it's there, the people are there, and you must have that vibe, and it's with us. The people are demanding change.
And you maintain that you're still a Suffolk County Councillor?
Indeed I am, until next May, and then the people will decide whether to keep me there or whatever.
And what was the moment when you thought, I'll jump ship? Would you have a chat with Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, Lee Anderson?
I think yes, it's to do with all those personalities.
So you've met them all, have you?
I've met most of them, yes. But it's to do with the fact that we need, the boats, the immigration policy, the taxation.
The small boats, you mean, on the South Coast?
Yes, the illegals. We don't know who the hell's coming into the country.
But only a government in power, which is going to probably be Labour or the Tories, really, frankly, looking at our system, can do that. So why are you joining a party with no hope of power?
A week is a long time in politics. Things are changing. It's a mass movement, and things are changing, and they need to change more urgently, yes, but it's there. I feel it. I feel the vibe.
It's quite different to UKIP, isn't it? I mean, you when you were a Tory member and a councillor, you looked at UKIP and thought, well, that's a bit different to Tories.
It was very focused on getting us out of the nightmare that was the EU.
Are you a Brexiteer? Are you a Brexiteer?
I am. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I want to ask the people what they want. We've got technology. Let's ask them. Are you in favour of mass uncontrolled immigration? Are you in favour of lower capital taxes? This is how we'll do it. And the tax policy is the first £20,000. These are vote winners. Let's put it to the people. Let's change.
That's the tax threshold going to from 14,000 to 20,000.
That's got to be good.
Yeah. And you mentioned that just finally, you mentioned net immigration. You've got Robert Jenrick saying today he's making a real pitch there, isn't he?
He's not the leader
reform voters, yeah.
Half the Conservative Party is now, I would say, Liberals. And at the end of the day, perhaps they should just join the Liberal Party because it's too wide a church without a common religion or prayer book.
Well, Christopher Hudson, a newly arrived member, a supporter of Reform UK from the Tories. Thank you for joining us here in Birmingham. Back to you, Emily.
Very much indeed, Christopher, and also to Councillor Christopher Hudson there as well. Right, we're going to go speak to Tom Harwood now, who's out and about at the conference. Tom, take us on a little journey around the conference. What's the atmosphere like?
I would love nothing more than to take you on a tour. Actually, why don't we have a look behind the scenes at our own GB News stand? You can see Chris Hope just getting de-rigged there, which is a bit meta, a bit behind the scenes there. But if we walk around here, we can see one of the biggest exhibits here at the Reform Conference, and that's this splendid Reform UK taxi, resplendent in turquoise. And clearly the chairman of the party there is used to being interviewed, so we'll not try and disturb him too much. But this is a professionalising outfit. That is the message that Reform UK wants to get across today. That's the message that they've been trying to get across as they move forward to aiming to win more seats. They won, of course, 5 members of Parliament at the election. Some people thought they would win none. It's a bridgehead, but it's not the huge amount that's needed to control the balance of power in Parliament, and it's certainly a while away from if they want to win the next general election. Clearly, you can see that the movement is growing here. They say they've got 80,000 members, around 4,000 of whom are here at the Birmingham NEC. But it's not just the members who are here. Of course, there's also a little bit of a merchandise shop. Should we have a look at the shop and see what you can get on offer here at the Reform Conference? It looks like some of these T-shirts are popular. You can get yourself a tote bag, a rosette, a mug, or even a water bottle, all branded in the Reform UK turquoise. Now, I should say that currently people are spilling out of the main auditorium. There have been speeches all morning and people are just breaking for lunch. So I wonder if we can sneak into the auditorium and show you what's going on there. Try and avoid the throngs of people. But it's just down here. So we're going to... I should mention as well that part of the professionalising ethos of this party is a new constitution, a new democratic way to install leaders or indeed boot leaders out. The proposal is that half of party members, half of registered party members, would be able to dislodge a leader, and that would mean that Nigel Farage went from being in sole control of the party to the members being in control of the party, which would mean a more rigorous form of democracy than just Nigel Farage holding the majority shares in the company. Here we are in the main arena. This is where the speeches have been happening all day and where the big speeches will happen into this afternoon as well. Nigel Farage speaking at 4 o'clock, a date for your diary, a time for your planner. Now here is the Reform UK bus. Yes, they've driven the bus right into the auditorium here. A pretty impressive feat up there. You can just make out Richard Tice being interviewed at the top there. But I don't know, I'll see if I can just hop on down here in a second. And I'm inside the bus now. This is, of course, the battle bus that went around various constituencies during the general election. But this is a big moment for Reform UK. They're trying to professionalise. They want to show themselves as the third largest party in British politics. Of course, they won the third largest number of votes at the general election. Of course, miles behind in terms of seats. Now, can they do the trick that the Lib Dems managed to pull off in the last couple of decades? Can they turn votes into seats? Can they get more efficient with where they campaign? And that is what the local elections are all about. That's why they're trying to form local groups, local chapters, and try and professionalise in that way, try and make their vote much more efficient. But shall we just look out to end here on the stage where no doubt we're going to see some more pyrotechnics from this party a little bit later. And it does seem that this is a busy conference. I'm not sure that we can dispute the claim that thousands of people are here.
Yes, it does look very busy indeed. I feel like I'm there. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. According to Mark in our inbox, you've had your Reform Weetabix this morning, and I think he's right. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. Well, it does look a pretty busy atmosphere at that conference. I've been to quieter conferences than that. It does seem to be buzzing there. We'll be catching up with Tom and Christopher as the show goes on to see what's happening. But there you go. Tom's very good at that, isn't he? Weaving through the crowds, getting to where we want to see, getting inside that bus. Brilliant stuff. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. This is, of course, Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, including that Labour funding scandal. It's not going anywhere.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Aman returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
What prompted you to go on your incredible journey?
Well, I was fighting my own demons at the time, before I started the walk, and it had been a long journey, if you like. And, I knew that I needed to make a change, and my daughter had just flown the nest. I was a single parent before this, and previous to that, I was ex-parachute regiment. And I knew that I needed to make a change, because if I didn't, I'm not sure where I would have been now, if that makes sense. So, yeah, something just came into my head at the very end of July and said, look, go and walk the UK coastline. And that's exactly what I did. And 6 years later, we've just finished.
You met your missus on the journey as well, didn't you? So truly, Chris, a transformative journey for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, you step into the unknown like that, you have no idea how things are going to work out. You go out with so little expectation, but only really with the aim to, for me personally, to come back feeling a lot better than what I was before I left. And that certainly succeeded. So everything that happened along that journey was one big learning curve. And I got to learn a lot about myself, a lot about, the public and people. And it was just a life-changing transformation for me. And, I learned so much, and I know what I want to do with the rest of my life as a result of it. And I met the most amazing people. And, I worked hard. 6 years of carrying your house on your back isn't the easiest feat in the world, I can promise you that, but it was worth every single step because, I rescued a dog along the way. I met my now fiance, Kate Barron, along the way, and we had a baby together along the way as well. So to start in the position that I did and then end up with all of that coming over the line with me was just something that I never expected. And I couldn't have dreamed it up, to be honest.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Aman Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's now 1:22, and lots of you have been getting in touch about Tom Harwood's walk around at the Reform UK. Nicholas very much enjoyed it. Excellent, he says. So Flip Flop says it's fantastic to see Tom get all excited. So there you go. He's knowledgeable and enthusiastic. Well done, Tom. So some congratulations there. I do like to, see what it's actually like, the atmosphere at these types of conferences, because they can be rather different. Sometimes there's no one in the main hall to see the speeches and everyone's out in little fringe events, you call them, talking amongst themselves, debating, or they're at little drinks events. But it does seem like most of the action is in that main speech hall at the Reform Party conference. Nigel Farage will, of course, be speaking a little bit later on. Some of you also not very impressed with this council's decision down in Cornwall to axe this tradition, saying that this is just health and safety gone mad, that they're trying to get rid of traditions for wokery instead. It does seem ridiculous that, a few people at a local council decide that a tradition that dates back to the 16th century isn't good for health and safety. Ergo, we need to scrap the lot. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me either. This is the tradition of children essentially having their head patted against a wall, a stone with a bit of turf on the side. Bizarre, certainly bizarre, but worth scrapping? I don't think so. Anyway, let's move on, because the Labour peer, Lord Ali, has donated over £300,000 to senior Labour ministers, including Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, over nearly 2 decades. Contributions increased under Starmer's leadership. This is very interesting indeed. We thought that Keir Starmer was the only one getting these donations, but actually it's 7 of them. The Prime Minister received over £155,000, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, £72,000. It turns out that Angela Rayner also welcomed the new year in. She spent New Year's Eve in a £2 million Manhattan flat owned by Lord Ali for 5 nights. She put it in her declaration that it was about £1,250. That's what it's worth. I'm not sure if that's the price going in Manhattan for 5 nights over the new year. But anyway, it's all raising questions about gift declarations amid what's being called Labour's cronyism row. Well, joining me now is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. I should put to you, Charlie, that the Conservatives were at this kind of thing as well.
Well, it's something that's been talked about for a long time, just to the extent of donations or gifts that are made to ministers, how they're declared, whether it's about transparency or whether it's about whether these gifts should be handed over in the first place. I mean, I think we've got to be open-minded about it on the one level. So if you are an event holder and you're inviting a backbench MP, for example, the reality is, without wanting to damage an MP's ego, you're probably just filling the quota of a public affairs agency just so they can go to their directors to say, oh, look, we know all of these different kinds of MPs from different political backgrounds. Aren't we great? It's a tick boxing exercise more than anything else, and a little perk for the backbench MP to go along to an event which can be, quite nice if it's a very stressful job that you've got as an MP. However, when it comes to ministers and senior frontbench members of Parliament, whether on the government, only then to be given also this guy a pass, a Downing Street pass, to go into number 10, and who knows what he was doing? Well, nobody knows, because even the Labour government couldn't justify or explain what he was doing, which is why that pass was redacted. That raises serious questions about cash for access, cash for questions, cash for influence, and we are yet to hear the answers. And I hope that every Conservative opposition minister, or anyone in the House of Commons for that matter, will be asking these questions of Keir Starmer when the conference season is over, should be writing to every one of those ministers that you just named there who received funding from Lord Ali to ask the questions: how many meetings have they had with him, on what basis, how long did they last for, what was his asks, what were his wants, because there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a right, is it, to spend New Year's Eve in a beautiful Manhattan apartment. It does appear as though some of these Labour politicians are just trying to live a more luxurious lifestyle than they can afford on their salary. And when it is someone who's donating to the party, when it is someone who clearly would love some influence over a Labour government, who's been a long-term supporter, eyebrows are going to raise. But it's also a tricky one for the likes of Jess Phillips and Angela Eagle, who've been out on the media rounds, having to try and handle questions on this, having to defend Keir Starmer and others who've been taking money and gifts and treats and whatever, tickets and the like. I mean, Jess Phillips today, she said it's an annoying distraction having to talk about Lord Ali's donations to Labour MPs. Yeah, I mean, it's annoying is one word for it, but it's also quite important, is it not, to people? People are seeing winter fuel payments being taken away from pensioners at the same time as they're seeing Keir Starmer get thousands of pounds for spectacles.
You're absolutely right. And look, I mean, being Prime Minister isn't probably that easy. I would argue. And if you're the Prime Minister, and if the economy was firing on all cylinders, and if you're able to come in and sort of, if you take away the Rwanda plan and replace it with something that actually is a deterrent, something that is actually going to work, and you do stop the boats, something that this country is crying out for, if you can protect the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, if you can increase pensions, if you can increase public sector pay, if you can cut taxes and allow the economy to flourish and grow and increase inward investment, well, hey, I mean, give the Prime Minister what he wants. He can go to Arsenal every day of the week, if you ask me, if he wants to. Give him all the luxury suits and glasses, because he's doing a brilliant job, regardless of their party persuasion.
So you can take gifts, Johnny. You can take as many gifts as you like, as long as you're doing a good job, as long as the economy is booming.
Exactly. But the reality is, because, if you're doing a great job, nobody would argue. I'm sure there'd be people that'll be saying, God, look at that sexy Starmer with those glasses, Couples might be screaming his name up and down the country because he's doing such a great job.
There was a time, not that long ago, where there were several columns by female journalists talking about how sexy Sir Keir Starmer and his wife were. Those seem to have dried up.
Well, quite. I mean, I think the suits are about as dull as some of his speeches. But this is the point. It's about political choices, and it's about the optics. And the optics are obviously awful, but the choices are that Sir Keir Starmer has accepted all of these gifts. The Labour front bench seem to have accepted all of these perks and hospitality, at the very same time that they are penalising over 10 million of the poorest people in our country, those pensioners that will rely on their winter fuel payments. You can try and, say, well, they're getting an increase in their pension anyway in the year, so that covers the cost or covers the takeaway, and we've got to make difficult decisions, and public sector workers have been underpaid for so many years. Well, that might be the case, but a public sector worker that's on 50, 60k a year, which is above the national average, getting a pay increase, at the same time as pensioners not having that winter fuel allowance, at the same time as a chief of staff being paid more than the chief, at the same time as the Prime Minister getting all of these perks, and every other member of the cabinet, seems to me, it is a political choice to take those. It's more than a distraction, and I feel sometimes with Jess Phillips and Angela Eagle who have to go and defend it, because it is indefensible, and I think there are many, many more questions to answer, and those questions will keep on coming.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie Rowley, former Special Advisor to Michael Gove. Thank you very much indeed. I guess some people will point to some of the sleaze allegations under the Conservative Party, I'm sure. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to be speaking to Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick after the news. He's had some things to say about English national identity. He believes it's under threat because of mass immigration and also the rise of woke culture. That after the news.
Emily, thank you. The top stories this hour. One of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims, who went by the name Natasha, says the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. He was described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods by lawyers representing 37 alleged victims of sexual abuse at a press conference in London today. Dean Armstrong KC said the case combined some of the most horrific elements of those, including Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Natasha described Al-Fayed as a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss. His hands gripping your face to his lips, or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
The government has announced new plans to tackle domestic violence. A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Raneem Uday and sister were both murdered by Ms Uday's ex-partner in 2018. She says those calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Raneem's law to transform the way the police handle cases of violence against women and girls. An inquest found mistakes made by West Midlands Police had materially contributed to the deaths. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government will ensure that things change. And Reform UK leader Nigel Farage received a standing ovation as he entered the main hall of the party's conference at the NEC in Birmingham. Yesterday, Farage said the conference marks the coming of age of the party. Earlier, Deputy Leader of Reform UK Richard Tice said Nigel Farage's relationship with the former US President Donald Trump is to the benefit of this country. Asked if he thought the party leader was distracted from his constituency duties by his trips to the US, Mr Tice told reporters far from it. Farage will be addressing the gathering today. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dry Friday for most, but we are going to see some big thunderstorms across parts of the south. The sunniest skies probably in western Scotland. That's because we've got high pressure sitting to the north and generally an easterly wind. So with some shelter, say western Scotland doing OK for sunshine, but also much of Northern Ireland and northwest England. Further south, things are brightening up. We've got some sunny spells, but that is sparking a few showers. Much of northeast England and eastern Scotland staying pretty drab. The showers in the south intensifying this afternoon and some rumbles of thunder, lightning flashes and hailstones are likely. Temperatures in the sunnier spells in the south getting into the low 20s. On the cool side, though, on these North Sea coasts where it stays fairly drab and a little drizzly with a brisk wind. Now, this is the thunderstorm warning area. Not everywhere in this area will see the thunderstorms. They will be hit and miss, but the potential for those thunderstorms to cause some problems. Certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Further north, well, it's a fine Friday across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, staying pretty drab in eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England, where the cloud will be thick enough for a little drizzle here and there. But the heaviest rain in those thundery showers across parts of the south and west will slowly fade as we go through this evening. For many, it'll be a fine Friday night, but notice further south, we are starting to import further heavy showers as we go through the early hours, and they could also cause some disruption during Saturday. A fairly mild night for most, with some clearer skies in western Scotland, temperatures well down into single digits. But again, here on Saturday, a fine day. But again, in the south, we do need to watch out for thunderstorms. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones, torrential downpours possible, could cause some flooding. And again, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Won't rain all day. There will be somewhat hit and miss. And in the sunny spells, again in the south, it will feel quite warm. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Still some congestion in Edinburgh. The westbound M8 from the M9, junction 2 to Livingston at 3, is still queuing in patches from an earlier collision there, but all the lanes are now back open. Big issues in Lancashire this Friday lunchtime. Eastbound M58 closed, junction 5 up Holland through towards the Orwell interchange, so shut towards the M6, queuing back to Scammelsdale. At junction 4, there's an Overton vehicle and spillage still being dealt with there. Southbound side of the M6, Knutsford to Middlewich, that's junction 19 down to 18 southbound. There's a breakdown causing delays. A lane blocked. Anti-clock M25 very slow towards Potters Bar 24. That follows an earlier collision, of course, that's in the roadworks. And a lorry fire being recovered. Clockwise M25, 2 lanes shut. Big queues heading towards Godstone at junction 6.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:37 and English identity is under threat. That's according to former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick as he continues to fight for the Tory leadership. Now, he is putting this down to mass immigration and woke culture. He says those things are breaking down the country's culture in various different ways. Now, he's talking about how we've had mass immigration at the same time as woke culture, which he says is undermining our sense of identity, and how this may have been partly behind some of those riots we saw during the summer months. He's saying that a frank discussion is going to be needed to have about the state of the nation. It's quite interesting, the timing of this, isn't it? When we have day one of the Reform UK Party conference. Is that a coincidence, or is that timing that he chose specifically? Perhaps he's looking to try and court some of those voters who shifted from the Conservatives to Reform at the last election. Of course, he is, at the moment, a lot of people saying he is the front runner for the Tory leadership. So he could, if he wins the leadership of the Conservatives, become our next Prime Minister. It's clear that he wants to make immigration one of the key areas, one of the key things that he's pledging to the country. I guess there's a question mark over how much trust there is, considering the Conservatives oversaw such high levels of immigration for quite so long. But joining us now is the man himself, Tory leader hopeful, Robert Jenrick. Robert, thank you very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. You are a busy man. Now, you've written this quite punchy...
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You've written this quite punchy piece in the Daily Mail today, talking about how you see English identity being under threat. Should we start by saying, what do you mean exactly by English identity being under threat? How do you believe it is?
Well, look, I'm a proud Brit, I'm a proud unionist, I want a strong Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but I'm also proud to be English. And I think we should be rightly proud of our distinct national identity. And I think influential people like politicians, the media, the civil service in England should say so as well. If we were Scottish or Welsh, of course our politicians would rightly celebrate our distinctive history, our landscapes, our food, our customs. And that is absolutely the right way forward. But I think in England in particular, in recent decades, our identity has started to fray. And we've seen that in our children not being taught to celebrate English history in our schools, our public institutions denigrating and dismissing our history and our identity. And as a result of illegal migration and legal migration, putting immense pressure on our ability to successfully integrate people into our country, and in particular in England and English cities. The ties that bind us together as a nation and our English national identity have started to fray. And I don't think England is a country at ease with itself right now. And I think we've got to change that. And it begins with English politicians, just like those in Scotland and Wales, speaking about our national culture and identity and having pride in doing so.
If the two problems are mass immigration and also a sort of woke establishment denigrating what it means to be English, history, culture, etc., not celebrating it in the same way as the Scots or the Welsh might do, if those two things are the problem, then isn't that the legacy of your party?
Well, I think it actually goes back much further than that. You know, George Orwell spoke about this 80 years ago when he said that England was a country in which our politicians and public intellectuals were too quick to dismiss our national identity. And we've seen that throughout my lifetime. But I do think that this has been particularly prevalent in the last 2 decades, when we've lived through an era of unprecedented levels of mass migration. 100 times more people have come into our country, and in particular to England and English cities, in the last 25 years than the 25 years before that. And that has put huge pressure on our culture and our identity and our ability to successfully integrate. And we've got to change that. I think it begins with us talking about it freely.
Absolutely. Robert, a lot of people watching will be frustrated, though, because they've voted time and time again for lower immigration, and what they've seen with the Conservatives is immigration actually accelerate beyond the Labour years before the Conservatives came into power in 2010. They've seen almost what they perceive as an open door policy when it comes to legal and also illegal immigration jumping up. How can they trust the Conservatives to get this right?
Well, I share their anger and frustration. I fought relentlessly in government to reduce the numbers coming in to our country and persuaded the then Prime Minister to do a big package of reforms which will reduce legal migration by 300,000 every year. And I argued that we needed to have a strengthened Rwanda policy. Ultimately, I wasn't successful in persuading her that, and that's why I resigned from the government at the turn of the year. So the public should know that I share their frustration. I want the Conservative Party to be different, to accept that it didn't get everything right when it was in government and now in opposition, to have crystal clear positions on these issues. I want Parliament to set a cap on legal migration in the tens of thousands or lower. And I want us to strengthen, not scrap, the Rwanda policy by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. If I'm lucky enough to lead the Conservative Party in the future, that is the way that I will proceed. And I think that slowly we can begin to regain the trust and the confidence of the millions of people in our country who did lose faith in us as a result of the policies that we had in recent years.
Robert Jenrick, today, of course, is day one of the Reform Party's big conference, their big party conference. They're saying that they've got their eyes set on the 2029 election. They think they can win it. They've got that big ambition. The timing of this article, was it to coincide with the Reform Conference, trying to win back some of those Conservative voters that chose to tick that box at the last election?
No, this is something I've been thinking about for a very long time. But look, I do want the Conservative Party to once again be the natural home for all small C Conservatives in our country, people who love our national identity, whether that's British culture and identity or Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland or England. I want it to be the home of everyone who wants secure borders, a tough approach to crime, respect for family and personal responsibility, strong defences, entrepreneurship and small state. Those are my values. Those are shared by millions of people across our country, some of whom have left the Conservative Party and gone to Reform. My mission is to bring those people back home to the Conservative Party.
And how do you make sure that when you're talking about English identity, people don't see it as excluding people of different skin colours, different faiths, different backgrounds? Because that's the difficulty, isn't it? When people talk about English identity, they assume that must be based on ethnicity. How do you make sure that that brings everyone together so we can have this positive, cohesive society that you clearly want?
Well, England, like our whole United Kingdom, is an open and tolerant nation, and it has welcomed people for generations of all ethnicities and all faiths. And that is absolutely right. That is the united country that I want to build. But it's only if we talk about our national identity and celebrate it, its history and everything that makes it so important, that we can help to pass it on intact to future generations. And if we reduce the number of people coming into our country to a sustainable level, that's the best way we can achieve that. Because people don't arrive in our country imbued with our history and culture and identity the minute they come here. It takes time. And that means we have to have a much more careful approach to bringing people and integrating them into this country. And I believe we can do it, but we have to be talking about it, and we have to be ensuring that our children are educated in our history, our institutions are celebrating it and not denigrating it. That is the way we move forward.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Robert Jenrick, a Tory leader, hopeful former minister. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. The scandal around Mohammed Al-Fayed, the billionaire former boss of Harrods, passed away last year, but the allegations against his conduct, including rape and sexual assault, continue to gather pace. Stay with us.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So Prince Harry, apparently, Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold. Do you feel there's any truth to this?
Lots of tongues are wagging, Nana. We heard that he was at the memorial for Lord Robert Fellows, and obviously William was there as well. And so there was lots of, everyone going into overdrive. That was in Snettisham, Norfolk the other day. He wasn't going to attend, said the People, a mouthpiece of his. And I would have actually thought that maybe a lookalike had turned up. But now we have been led to believe that Harry's been talking to people from friends from his old life. And it's not that he wants to make a permanent move to the UK, so I believe. What I've heard, it's more about his reputation.
Well, he wants to have his cake and eat it, by the sounds of it. Obviously, no good cake it remains uneaten.
We know that the royal family is his currency. Even his late mother, obviously he's almost usurped her memory, and he needs this. He needs this to make money. Of course, he raced in for Lord Robert Fellows' memorial service. So there's lots of ambiguous behaviour, and he is going to be, in New York. We call it the silly season, don't we? And we're also looking. There's lots of different stories that are coming out, but he needs to sell stuff. He's going to be in New York, and it's. We've got to remember the enormous amount of hurt and offence. Exactly. Prince William absolutely reeling. Poor Princess Catherine. Spare book coming out at the most awful time. And you've got the Netflix
series.
It's absolutely, this is a rehabilitation strategy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is now 1:50. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Lots of you getting in touch on that interview we just had with Robert Jenrick. Lots of people saying a little bit too late to hear that from him. But keep your views coming in. We will get to some of them in a little bit. But sleazebag, predator and a monster without a compass, those are just some of the ways former Harrods boss Mohammed Al-Fayed has been described by the dozens of women who've now accused him of sexually assaulting them while he was running the world-famous department store. Now, speaking at a press conference earlier, the lawyers for the victims said Harrods enabled the abuse the women suffered and had full culpability. Well, let's discuss this further with our correspondent Cameron Walker, who was at that press conference. Cameron, what was said?
Yeah, some really, really serious allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed, as you say, former chairman of Harrods. He died last year at the age of 94, so he never faced charges. But 37 alleged victims or alleged survivors of Al-Fayed are currently being represented by lawyers. But lawyers suggested there could be many more victims that haven't yet come forward. Dean Armstrong KC says Al-Fayed's alleged abuse combines the very worst of Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, all of course known sexual predators. Savile because the institution knew about his behaviour, allegedly Harrods. Jeffrey Epstein because Al-Fayed allegedly created a procurement system to find and entice young girls to be near him. And Harvey Weinstein because, like Fayed, he is at the very top of an organisation allegedly abusing his power. Now, lawyers described Al-Fayed repeatedly as a monster, and he has been accused of serial rape, attempted rape and sexual abuse, to name but a few. Bruce Drummond, who was a barrister also at the press conference, he said this is one of the worst cases of corporate sexual exploitation I have ever seen. And one survivor, Natasha, very bravely shared her story with us, and a warning, what you're about to hear does contain details of sexual abuse.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss, his hands gripping your face to his lips, or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
Well, Harrods have released a statement following the BBC documentary which uncovered all of these allegations, and they said they are utterly appalled by the allegations, condemned them in the strongest possible terms and acknowledged that they failed their employees who were Al-Fayed's victims, and we sincerely apologise. Harrods of today is very different to the organisation owned and controlled by Al-Fayed between 1985 and 2010. Litigation could well start very soon.
Thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, our correspondent there outside Harrods in central London. Some of the descriptions, the allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed are pretty harrowing. Of course, he passed away last year, so there will never be real justice brought against him. But what's been alleged, truly, well, just disgusting, really. Stick with us, though. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to check back in with Tom Harwood at the Reform UK Party conference, also get his view on what Robert Jenrick had to say in that interview a little bit earlier. But let's have a look at the weather next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Much of the UK having a fine Friday, but we've already seen some thunderstorms and one or two more to come across the south this afternoon. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Not everywhere in the warning area will see a downpour, but where they occur, large hailstones, lots of lightning could cause some issues. They tend to fade as we go through this evening, but more could rumble into parts of the south during the early hours. A bit of drizzle is possible on some eastern coasts, but generally the weather's dry across the north, with clearer skies in the northwest, allowing temperatures to dip actually close to freezing in some rural spots. We have another Met Office yellow warning in place for Saturday as further thunderstorms develop. Again, hit and miss nature of the storms means that not everywhere in this warning area will catch a downpour, but where they occur tomorrow, they could cause some problems. Meanwhile, further north, the weather's much calmer, but still quite grey and drab on some of these North Sea coasts. Western Scotland, yes, it starts chilly, but here, the lion's share of the sunshine once more during Saturday. By and large, a fine day across Northern Ireland too. For England and Wales, there will be sunny spells, but there will also be these heavy showers. Parts of the Midlands, Wales, southern England in particular. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones possible, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. But it won't rain all day, and some places may dodge the downpours altogether. And in the sunshine, quite warm here again, temperatures into the mid-20s, perhaps much cooler on some of these North Sea coasts where it stays drab with that breeze coming in. But quite warm again in western Scotland by day, quite cool again to start Sunday, but yet again here another fine day. Again, in the south, another day of watching some heavy downpours. A yellow warning for Sunday. This is for rain at this time, more persistent and potentially again causing some flooding after the weekend's downpours. There will again be some sunshine in western Scotland, and again in the south, temperatures may squeak over 20 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
I've got some really good news for you. You've won £30,000.
£30,000 cash? Oh my God, I'm going to cry. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 20th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live here at the Reform Party conference, where later on today, the leader, Nigel Farage, will be among the speakers as this two-day event gets underway here in Birmingham.
Excellent stuff. Now, Starmer, he's in a bit of turmoil. A civil war brews in number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own. And losing our Englishness, Robert Jenrick has told GB News that mass immigration and woke culture have put England's national identity at risk. We'll break down exactly what he had to say. Well, it seems as though you've amassed a crowd behind you, Tom.
Yeah, I can't tell you the hubbub in this hall in the Birmingham NEC here. In just a few minutes, I'm going to be standing up and having a bit of a walk around to show you more about what is going on here at this Reform Party conference. I've been told 4,100 Reform members are here in this hall and the corresponding buildings. They're expecting perhaps up to 5,000 people here over the course of this two-day event. And the message that the Reform Party is trying to get across today is that they are a professionalising party, a party that's moving from a company controlled by majority shareholder Mr. Nigel Farage to a party controlled by its members. That's the mission of this conference, but also, of course, looking ahead to those crucial local elections. Can they get the organisational structure required to build the fundamentally important grassroots movement that can build the councillors and then the members of Parliament by 2029? They're attempting to do in just 5 short years what other parties took decades to achieve.
Well, that's a big, big task they have ahead of them. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. And please do get in touch at home if you're watching and listening, gbnews.com/YourSaver. Let's get to the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. One of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims, who went by the name Natasha, says the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. He was described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods by lawyers representing 37 alleged victims of sexual abuse at a press conference in London today. Dean Armstrong KC said the case combines some of the most horrific elements of those, including Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Natasha described Al-Fayed as a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable.
We would be sent to see Al-Fayed because he had a job for us to do. It was always more of a friendly chat than actual work. But then these private meetings turned into more. A forced kiss, his hands gripping your face to his lips, or pulling you down on his lap, where his hands were free to explore any part of your body that he wished. These incidents lasted seconds, but the fear instilled left me paralysed. Al-Fayed brushed off these moments like they had never happened. But I was always reminded not to mention them to anyone. He would know if I did.
The government's announced new plans to tackle domestic violence. A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Ranimu Day and sister were both murdered by Ms. Uday's ex-partner in 2018. And she says those calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Raneem's law to transform the way the police handle cases of violence against women and girls. An inquest found mistakes made by West Midlands Police had materially contributed to the deaths. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the government will ensure that things will change.
Victims of domestic abuse need to know that the police will be there for them in an emergency. That didn't happen for Rani Muda when she lost her life, and that's why we're bringing domestic abuse experts into 999 control rooms like this to make sure that the emergency response is right. We saw when Rani Muda called 999 4 times on the night she was killed, no one came. We cannot let that happen again. So we'll begin with the first wave, then we want to roll this out right across the country, so that domestic abuse victims can know the police will be there for them when they call.
In other news, the terrorist group Hezbollah has reportedly fired dozens of rockets into Israel. The group says it's targeting Israeli military sites. The IDF says 140 missiles were launched. And that's as Israel carried out further strikes on southern Lebanon overnight, saying its warplanes hit more than 100 Hezbollah rocket launchers and other terrorist sites. The IDF said the launchers were ready to be fired against Israel. Lebanon's state-run national news agency said Israel carried out at least 52 strikes in the south of the country last night. Earlier, the leader of Hezbollah said deadly explosions earlier in the week crossed all red lines, accusing Israel of what he said represented a declaration of war. Israel has not said it was behind those attacks, which saw pagers and walkie-talkies explode across the country. and which Lebanese authorities said killed 37 people and wounded 3,000. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage received a standing ovation as he entered the main hall of the party's conference at the NEC in Birmingham. Yesterday, Farage said the conference marks the coming of age of the party. Earlier, Deputy Leader of Reform UK Richard Tice said Nigel Farage's relationship with the former US President Donald Trump is to the benefit of this country. Asked if he thought the party leader was distracted from his constituency duties by his trips to the US, Mr Tice told reporters far from it. Farage will be addressing the gathering today. Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Mr Jenrick's also suggested it's a contributing factor to this summer's riots, with unrest spreading across the country in the wake of the Southport knife attack which killed 3 young girls.
England in particular, in recent decades, our identity has started to fray. And we've seen that in our children not being taught to celebrate English history in our schools, our public institutions denigrating and dismissing our history and our identity, and as a result of illegal migration and legal migration, putting immense pressure on our ability to successfully integrate people into our country, and in particular in England and English cities. The ties that bind us together as a nation and our English national identity have started to fray. And I don't think England is a country at ease with itself right now.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 2:08. And Nigel Farage, he's going to address the Reform UK conference later this afternoon. There he is. He's expected to issue a clarion call for change. The party's also expected to unveil its plan to win the 2029 general election, following what they see as a very strong performance back in July, where the party managed to gain 5 MPs and became the 3rd biggest party in terms of vote share. So let's cross over to Birmingham now and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, tell us.
Hi, that's right. Well, I'm joined now by Anne Widdecombe, the party's Justice and Home Affairs immigration spokesman, forgive me. Anne Widdecombe, you've been around the House longer than I have. You've been part of a Tory government. Can this lot, Reform UK, form a government in 2029?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What we've got to do is persuade people to have the courage. Because a lot of people last time wanted to vote for us, just slightly scared at the last moment and either abstained or voted the other way. Got to persuade people that we can really do this. And I think that's where getting 5 MPs into Parliament has helped hugely, because people have said, oh, yes.
Yep. It'd be historic, wouldn't it, to get 321 more MPs, enough to form a majority in the House of Commons. I mean, it hasn't happened before on that scale.
Well, there's always a first time. And let's face it, we've come from nothing to getting over 4 million votes. From nothing to over 4 million votes. We came ahead of the Lib Dems in share of the vote. You know, we were right behind the 2 major parties. Tell me when that's been done before.
But fewer MPs, because you and I know the system is weighted against small parties. Without electoral reform, you haven't got a hope in hell, have you?
Oh yes, of course we have. We got 5 with the current system. If we can get 5 with the current system, we get 305 with the current system. Come on.
Okay. The issue, though, we're here discussing the overhaul of the party's constitution, the rule book, to give members, many of them are standing watching this, watching you speak now, give them a chance to have a say with the running of the party.
Absolutely.
Ben Habib, the former deputy leader, isn't happy. He says it doesn't go far enough, and in fact the board can veto any vote of no confidence. He's right, isn't he?
I think what Ben Habib really must recognise is that none of the other major parties have a situation where the membership at large can mount a vote of no confidence in the leader. It's done by their MPs. We've only got 5 MPs. You can't have rules about percentages and letters and all this sort of. You can't have rules when you've only got 5 MPs. So I think my plea to Ben would, Ben, be patient. You know, we're democratising, we're setting up branches, you know, we're doing all of this stuff. We've got a constitution for the first time. You know, so be patient. And as we increase in parliamentary strength, we will be able to put into place the sorts of procedures he wants.
Because the rules are, if you have 100 MPs in reform, you can have a vote of no confidence if half of them want it. So you have a degree of check on the power of the chairman, of the leader.
Yes.
Bennett Beaver, you got a future in your party? He's sniping from the sidelines. It's a bit annoying.
Well, come on. Ben is also going and talking to a lot of branches, you know, our new branches. He's finding, as he said the other day, it wasn't on GBNews, so I won't say what it was on, but he said the other day that he had talked to groups of 100. This is a brand new branch. 100 people there. You know, the Tories should be so lucky.
So we're at ground zero, trying to construct your party. That's what's going on. You can win seats in the May elections and Scottish and Welsh elections. Is that possible?
That is possible. We'll certainly be concentrating on the local elections tremendously because we haven't concentrated there before. Because we couldn't, we had to focus on what was important, which was getting a toehold in Parliament.
The Tories are getting organised, aren't they? Robert Jenrick there speaking earlier to Emily on GB News. Do you think they've got a chance when they get organised, when they start peeling back some of the 4 million who supported your party at the election?
I don't think they've got much chance at all because the fact is they are not saying the things that people want politicians not only to say but to do. And they're not saying that. So, but, I mean, give Jenrick his chance if he does get the leadership, and out of the bunch that's there, he's probably the best. If he does get the leadership, let us see exactly what he is going to promise to do. Not pie in the sky, no, Labour. Control the gangs. That will stop the votes. They might as well be King Canute trying to turn back the tide. It's ridiculous. So let's hear.
So Robert Jenrick is the one you fear of those 4 candidates in reform?
I don't fear any of them, mate.
Well,
I don't fear the Tories anymore.
You can't sleep at night.
I'm not remotely worried by any of them, and that is perfectly truthful because I think it's going to take them a very long time indeed. Very long time to regain trust.
Okay. Well, Anne Widdecombe now speaking to us here at the conference there. And earlier she was on the stage there giving a speech on immigration and justice.
Widdecombe, she's not afraid of anyone, is she? Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, there at the Reform Conference. Well, we're going to check in with Tom Harwood now, who's been out and about. Oh, where are you now, Tom?
Emily, I've managed to wangle my way onto the top deck of the Reform UK battle bus. That's right, they've parked the bus here in the at the edge of the auditorium, and from this perspective we can look out and see all of these seats. Just a few moments ago, all of these seats were full for the speeches. They've broken for lunch. Some people have been telling me they're laying down sort of jackets on seats to behave like Germans by a swimming pool to make sure that they get the best spots. But there we go. Actually, I'm going to head back down and see if we can have a look around the entire auditorium now. Excuse me, might I just pop out? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Cheers. Well, here we are on the auditorium floor, and yeah, this has been a pretty electric conference. They say 4,100 people have turned up so far, perhaps 5,000 over the course of the 2 days. That's out of a membership that the party chairman, Zia Youssef, now says tops 80,000 members. That's not far off the parties that have formed governments in recent years. But the Reform Party wants to be able to win that 2029 general election. That's what Nigel Farage has been saying today. That's what he said when he arrived this morning. Is it possible? Well, many people would look at the 5 MPs that Reform UK managed to win at the general election and say it's a pretty steep climb to go from 5 to 326. But you know, there's a huge amount of optimism here, and they believe that to some extent they may be able to make it happen. It would be a remarkable thing. But let's have a look at what else is on offer here at the Reform Party conference, because I'm going to take you to the shop. Yes, they've been selling all sorts of trinkets. They've been selling all sorts of bits and bobs. Let's swing up here just past this fringe event. I don't know if we can. What are they talking about here? I think they've been talking about the nanny state. That's something that is close to the heart of many GB News viewers, I am sure. But beyond the little breakout fringe space there, we've got the shop here. It's always fun to see what sort of merchandise is on offer, and if you're a member here at the Reform Party conference, you could help yourself to a t-shirt, a rosette, you could even get yourself a Reform UK mug or water bottle. They offer caps as well with the slogan, "Let's save Britain." And that takes us out to this breakout space. It is, of course, the lunch breakout, so let's swing around and try and find our way through all of these people back to our own stand. I've got to say, I was expecting perhaps an older demographic here at the Reform Conference than that we've found. There are all ages here, and that's something that the Reform Party people I've been speaking to have wanted to stress. They really think that there's something going on in the body politic of the United Kingdom, that this isn't just sort of retired colonels in the home counties. This is something else. They believe it can be turned into a mass movement, and in that way they want to be able to stretch out and stretch beyond what the various outfits that Nigel Farage has led have been able to do before. Let's not forget that Nigel Farage was at the top of UKIP for more than a decade. It had a huge amount of success, but only ever elected 2 members of parliament in by-elections and 1 member of parliament at a general election. He's smashed through that number with Reform UK, 5 members of parliament elected, but of course that was a very strange election, and can it be sustainable? Well, why don't we end here by taking a rest with the Reform UK taxi in its marvellous blue outgarb, and I'll hand back to you, Emily. It's a busy time here at the Reform Conference.
Fantastic. Certainly a full room there, isn't it, with all the breakout zones, people of all ages. I do remember during the campaign at the last election that there was quite a buzz on TikTok among some teenagers for the Reform Party, which was unexpected, perhaps for some. But Tom Harwood, thank you very much, as ever, our Deputy Political Editor, and also, of course, on Good Afternoon Britain. Thank you very much indeed. Right, well, lots to get through today. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We're going to be talking about the ongoing Labour funding scandal, particularly when it comes to these donations from this big Labour donor and peer. Lots more after the break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
An army veteran has become the world's most tattooed woman after a 10-year journey to ink 99.98% of her body. I mean, that's really nearly everywhere. But I wonder, I mean, yes, she is unusual, and you'd know her if you met her, frankly, wouldn't you? But are tattoos acceptable they're becoming more and more acceptable just amongst all of us, aren't they? But what about in the workplace?
99.98% of her body tattooed. Do you think this would affect the way that she is received at work?
I do affect it would how she is seen at work, just purely because tattoos are still so stigmatised in the workplace. In today's rapidly evolving society, the traditional standards of what is socially acceptable are being redefined. Facial tattoos, full body tattoos, once stigmatised, are increasingly seen as a form of personal expression, and there shouldn't be a barrier to one's professional or social life.
If you are going for a job, for instance, we make up 90% of our minds about somebody within the first 3 seconds. And I have written a book on body language, and the face is just so important. You need to have the smile, you need to be able to read the facial expression, even when we're speaking. Now, if the face is really heavily tattooed, you can't do that.
Jade said that there is still this stigma, particularly to facial tattoos. We do judge people with tattoos, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, we do, because it's not the norm. And as a human being, we tend to judge what is not the norm. And as Jade says, we are getting much more used to it. It is much more socially acceptable. But a lot of firms will say, if you've got a tattoo, you cover it. We don't want tattoos in the workplace.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Aman returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 2:21. We were just checked in with Christopher Hope and Tom Harwood at the Reform Party conference. It did seem to be pretty full, actually. Sometimes these conferences are a little bit empty because they hire out these massive conference halls, these business centres, and if you don't pack it, it can feel a bit vast. But it did look like there was quite a buzz there. I do wonder whether Robert Jenrick, who we spoke to earlier, Tory leadership hopeful, whether people are listening if he's trying to get back some of these reform voters. Lots of you have been getting in touch about it. Andy says, Jenrick, the One Nation Conservative Party, they need to own up to the demise of Britain with the total annihilation of their party. OK, strong stuff from Andy. Leaky Bucket says, what a principled man Robert Jenrick is. Leaky Bucket, I don't think that's actually your name, but there you go. You don't want to put your real name. Fine by me. And others have said, sadly for Jenrick, it's him and his party that have missed the boat when it comes to the immigration problem. So it's going to be quite difficult for Robert Jenrick to cut through the noise, I think, when it comes to issues to do with immigration. I mean, the Conservatives, their legacy is one of very, very high immigration, millions. I think since 2010, about 6 million people the population has grown by, in great thanks to high levels of immigration. So they've got a lot of trust to regain if they're going to win that back. But let's move on to what's been encircling the Labour government. Labour peer Lord Ali, he's donated over £300,000, it turns out, to not just Keir Starmer, but to senior Labour ministers, Angela Rayner, as well as David Lammy. You've got Bridget Phillipson, Ed Miliband, Wes Streeting, Liz Kendall. They've all taken money in donations from this guy. This over nearly 2 decades. Contributions have increased under Keir Starmer's leadership. So is he very much taking the lead from the front, setting a bad example, setting the example to his team that it's absolutely fine to receive whatever gifts, whatever donations, as long as you write them down in the way that you should. It's all fine. It's all fine. Take what you want. But the Prime Minister, he received over 155,000. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, 72,000. Turns out also that Angela Rayner welcomed the new year in at a £2 million Manhattan flat owned by, you guessed it, Lord Ali, for 5 nights, and that's raised some questions about gift declarations amid this cronyism row. So joining me is political commentator Jonathan Liss. Jonathan, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere. You've got ministers and senior MPs having to answer all sorts of questions on this when they go onto the media. Jess Phillips this morning, you had Angela Eagle battling with these kind of questions as well. You've got Harriet Harman intervening as well too. I mean, where does Keir Starmer go from here?
I think there are 2 distinct issues here, Emily. The first is about political donations, which are completely normal and an absolute standard part of our democratic process. We can have a conversation about how political parties are funded and about how politicians should be funded, because at the moment, parties have to rely on private donations effectively in order to survive, because we don't really have a taxpayer-funded model in this country. So that's the first one. And obviously the second one, which has sort of become allied into this, is the issue of gifts. And whether that might constitute improper influence, about whether the Prime Minister in particular is taking too many freebies and what that might say about the direction of the government and its sort of compass and all the rest of it. I think there are two distinct issues. I don't have a problem with people taking donations if they are declared in the proper way. £300,000 over 2 decades obviously sounds like a lot of money, but in the broad context, it's not such a great deal of money when you look at the number of people that the money's been given to and the length of time over which that money has been given. And obviously, we saw there were plenty of donations given to people like Boris Johnson in the last government. The problem there being they weren't properly declared, or they were loans, and there was sort of murkiness in that. This one, so long as they're properly declared, I don't see a problem with it. But I do think that Labour needs to be a lot more wary of the optics of it, so to speak, about how it looks to the public, and that they're sort of getting freebies, clothes, etc., while other people are struggling.
I think you're right to differentiate between the two, between political donations for political activities and these sort of freebies that have been highlighted in the press. I think it just gets to people, doesn't it, to see the Prime Minister of this country accepting donations for, Taylor Swift tickets, for the football because he can't go into the stands, for spectacles, for a personal shopper for his wife. I do think the nickname Sakir Scrounger or Free Gear Kia, they're going to stick, aren't they, Jonathan? They're going to stick.
That's the first time I've heard those, Emily. I don't think they will stick particularly. Look, we'll be talking about many more things in the next 5 years, as you know very well.
He's got his hand out, Jonathan. He's got his hand out.
Huh? He's sorry, what?
He's got his hand out.
Right. Look, I think that the issue of getting concert tickets and stuff, that is okay to an extent. I think that, you're the Prime Minister will be seen at big events, and it's I think it's normal for senior politicians to accept hospitality, provided there's no conflict of interest. I think there's a difficulty in football when the Prime Minister is talking about setting up a new football regulator and that kind of thing, and that might take you into difficult grounds. And I think that there is also an argument which Starmer raised himself about the difficulty of being in the stands when you're the Prime Minister. And if Arsenal is laying on a box for him at no cost to the taxpayer, I don't see that there's a big problem with that.
I don't know, because you've got a football regulator potentially going through Parliament, right?
That's the thing. There is a potential issue with that, but I don't think it's so terrible. And I think there's another point, Emily, which is that in a way these people can't win. Because if you go out wearing clothes that don't sort of, pass, sort of cut the mustard, if you like, people on this channel will complain about the Prime Minister looking scruffy and his wife not being well dressed.
I don't know. You can get a lovely outfit for not thousands of pounds,
I think that when you're the Prime Minister, or the spouse of the Prime Minister, I do think that there is an extra pressure to represent the country informally or formally.
I think you're doing what Baroness Harman has told Keir Starmer not to do, which is to try and justify these gifts.
I'm not
She came out and tried to justify these gifts.
I'm suggesting that there might be limited circumstances where it's okay to, for example, I think a lot of designers have offered Victoria Starmer complimentary dresses. I think she turned them down. I think it would be completely fine to accept those, particularly if they're showcasing British style and so on. And you are representing the country in that capacity.
Jonathan, it's a bit weird though, isn't it? I mean, we've spoken about this before, but the personal shopper for his wife, again, the nickname Lady Victoria Sponger comes to mind as well, Jonathan Liss. I mean, it might sound harsh, but it's true, is it not, Jonathan?
Emily,
it is spongy.
What people would say. You know what people would say if she was photographed by a hostile newspaper.
Oh, come on, they're millionaires. They're millionaires, Jonathan. They're not on the bread line.
Obviously there is. I think there's a balance. There's no absolute yes or no to this. I think on the one hand, they are rich enough to be buying their own clothes. Absolutely. On the other hand, they are in a new role now. They are absolutely front-facing. Victoria Starmer is not a publicity seeker, but she is the wife of the Prime Minister, and she knows that she'll be photographed out and about. And so there is nothing wrong with getting help. Or getting some free designs from people who obviously they want to showcase their designs and sort of British talent.
It does disproportionately seem to be coming from this one man, doesn't it, though?
I mean, look, if you look at the previous Prime Ministers, obviously,
the trip to Manhattan for Angela Rayner,
That's again, I think it's completely fine. If you are, a political donor and you have a relationship with a senior member of the cabinet or shadow cabinet, and you have a property somewhere, you say, take this property, declare it in the normal way. People have been doing that for a very long time. Boris Johnson had all of his holidays paid for, and my goodness, he could afford to go on his own.
I think she underplayed, though, the value of that particular gift. 5 nights, was it, in a luxury apartment overlooking Manhattan? Little more than £1,200, I think, Jonathan. But there you go. Jonathan List, thank you very much indeed. Political commentator, good to speak to you. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Apparently, Kamala Harris owns a gun, and she'd use it if there was an intruder in her house. That next after the news with Mark White.
Good afternoon. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. One of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims has said the billionaire businessman was highly manipulative. A London-based news conference heard the former Harrods owner described as a monster enabled by a system that pervaded the business. One lawyer said the case combined some of the most horrific elements of the Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein abuse scandals. Also breaking news, and the Israeli military has confirmed that the Hezbollah terror group has fired more than 140 rockets into northern Israel today. The barrage started a number of fires when some rockets landed in open areas of the Israeli countryside. There are no reports at this stage of any injuries. In response, Israeli forces have targeted Hezbollah launch sites across southern Lebanon. And within the last hour, warplanes also bombed a Hezbollah stronghold in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. The Foreign Secretary is urging British nationals in Lebanon to leave while they can. A campaigner whose niece was killed by her ex-partner after calling the police multiple times says domestic violence victims need to be heard the first time they call 999. Noor Norris, whose niece Raneem Uday and sister were both murdered by Miss Uday's ex-partner in 2018. He says that calling the police for help need to be given the opportunity to be saved. The Home Office says some police forces will start embedding domestic abuse specialists in their 999 control rooms early next year as part of Raneem's law to transform the way the police handle cases of violence against women and girls. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage received a standing ovation as he entered the main hall at the party's conference at the NEC in Birmingham. Mr Farage has said the conference marks the coming of age of the party. Earlier, Reform's deputy leader Richard Tice said Nigel Farage's relationship with former US President Donald Trump was to the benefit of this country. Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Mr Jenrick said immigration has had a clear impact on our customs, culture and cohesion. Mr Jenrick also suggested it was a contributing factor to this summer's riots. And finally, Anthony Joshua is ready to take revenge for coming off worse in a brutal sparring session against Daniel Dubois 8 years ago when the British rivals clashed at Wembley tomorrow night. Joshua admitted he was hurt by Dubois when they duelled in training at Team GB headquarters in Sheffield in 2016. The year he defeated Charles Martin to win his first world title. At the time, Dubois was just 18 years old and still an amateur, but the power he displayed against the Olympic gold medalist that day convinced promoter Frank Warren to sign him up as a professional. There you are, you're right up to date with the latest headlines. We're back with a full summary at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dry Friday for most, but we are going to see some big thunderstorms across parts of the south. The sunniest skies probably in western Scotland. That's because we've got high pressure sitting to the north and generally an easterly wind. So with some shelter, say western Scotland doing OK for sunshine, but also much of Northern Ireland and northwest England. Further south, things are brightening up. We've got some sunny spells, but that is sparking a few showers. Much of northeast England and eastern Scotland staying pretty drab. The showers in the south intensifying this afternoon, and some rumbles of thunder, lightning flashes and hailstones are likely. Temperatures in the sunnier spells in the south getting into the low 20s. On the cool side, though, on these North Sea coasts where it stays fairly drab and a little drizzly with a brisk wind. Now, this is the thunderstorm warning area. Not everywhere in this area will see the thunderstorms. They will be hit and miss, but the potential for those thunderstorms to cause some problems. Certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Further north, well, it's a fine Friday across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, staying pretty drab in eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England, where the cloud will be thick enough for a little drizzle here and there. But the heaviest rain in those thundery showers across parts of the south and west will slowly fade as we go through this evening. For many, it'll be a fine Friday night, but notice further south, we are starting to import further heavy showers as we go through the early hours, and they could also cause some disruption during Saturday. A fairly mild night for most, with some clearer skies in western Scotland, temperatures well down into single digits. But again, here on Saturday, a fine day. But again, in the south, we do need to watch out for thunderstorms. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones, torrential downpours possible, could cause some flooding. And again, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Won't rain all day. There will be somewhat hit and miss. And in the sunny spells, again in the south, it will feel quite warm. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Still a closure for the eastbound M58 this afternoon in Lancashire. Now it's shut from the turn-off at Up Holland Junction 5 through towards the M6 at the Orwell interchange. It follows an earlier collision and a spillage, so no way through eastbound. Southbound M6 still struggling. Junction 19 to 18. That's Knutsford down to Middlewich. There's emergency repairs. It's slow going. A lane closure in place. A lane shut too is lane 3 of 3. This is southbound the M5 in Somerset near to Clevedon Junction 20. An accident there is causing queues. There's one as well southbound on the M1. That means a lane closed and the exit step coming off at Luton North 11A is partially blocked. That's causing delays as well. And big queues clockwise M25 in the roadworks. 2 lanes shut before Godstone at Junction 6. There's a lorry fire there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's now 2:38. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, we've got a lot more coming up on today's show before we're through. But before that, let's speak to Martin Daubney, who is up at 3 o'clock. Martin, what have you got in store for us?
Well, let's get ready to rumble. All eyes on Birmingham as we build towards Nigel Farage making his keynote speech as the leader of the Reform Party, putting his pitch to be Britain's next Prime Minister. Before that, we'll have Lee Anderson. We'll also speak to the party chairman. Later in the show, I'll be joined in the studio by Gloria Allred, an astonishing women's rights lawyer who took down Harvey Weinstein, now representing the alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed, a woman on a mission. She'll join me in the studio. And as the sun sets in Arnhem, we'll join the 80th birthday commemorations over there to watch the wreaths being laid and listen to the pipes being played on those historic bridges on the battlefields of Arnhem. That's all coming 3 till 6. All eyes on the Reform Conference.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that'll be a very moving event to finish as well. Martin, we're going to have our eyes on your show, that's for sure. 3 till 6. Stay tuned for that. We're now going to have a little catch-up with Tom Harwood. Tom is at the Reform Conference. He's not going to be leaping around for us this time, I don't think. He's staying put. But a little earlier, we spoke to Robert Jenrick, didn't we? He has a bit of a punchy piece out in today's Daily Mail. He says the timing of it has nothing to do with the Reform Party conference, but I sense that maybe it did. He's talking about national identity, talking about mass immigration, talking about woke culture. Let's have a little listen.
England in particular, in recent decades, our identity has started to fray. And we've seen that in our children not being taught to celebrate English history in our schools, our public institutions denigrating and dismissing our history and our identity, and as a result of illegal migration and legal migration, putting immense pressure on our ability to successfully integrate people into our country, and in particular in England and English cities. The ties that bind us together as a nation and our English national identity have started to fray. And I don't think England is a country at ease with itself right now.
Well, Tom, your reaction?
Yeah, I think there is no coincidence that Robert Jenrick is setting out his stall on Englishness at the same time as the Reform Party conference. Now, we know from psephological analysis that the areas of England that feel most English, that rate their English identity as highest, were the areas that were most likely to vote to leave the European Union, and were the areas of the hottest heat map for both UKIP and then the Brexit Party, and now Reform UK. There is something intrinsically English about the support for this party and the 4 million voters who decided to back it, as opposed to another party on the centre-right of politics, the Conservative Party. Clearly, Robert Jenrick thinks that Englishness is one of those ways in which he can tap in to the sort of voter who turned their back on the Conservatives and voted for Reform UK instead. And I do think that there is a lot of data to back him up on this, although there is a risk. There is a risk on doubling down on Englishness, as David Cameron did, if you'll remember, after the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. David Cameron came out the morning after, said, right, now we need to fix what's known as the West Lothian question, where Scottish MPs could, for example, vote on English laws that only affect England and didn't affect Scotland due to devolution. Well, he brought in English votes for English laws, but that then turned into a bit of constitutional wrangling. And is it? This is a big question. If we're going to go after questions of policy rather than identity, might that be a murky sort of quagmire to get stuck into with all sorts of constitutional backwards and forwardses? Might it be better to stick to those questions that, to be fair, Robert Jenrick was talking about, of English identity in schools?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood, there at the Reform Party conference. I guess if Robert Jenrick is trying to make a pitch to Reform voters, a lot of people there may have voted Conservative in the past. The question is, are they listening? But we're going to move on to the United States, because the Vice President, Kamala Harris, she's been raising a few eyebrows because she decided to say bluntly and publicly that she would shoot anyone who intruded into her home. She made the comments in an interview with Oprah Winfrey, no less. Let's take a listen.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun. I did not know that. If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that. But my staff will deal with that later. Yeah.
Well, very interesting indeed. So to discuss this further, I'm joined in the studio by the chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Now, Greg, I am not an American, but I sense instinctively that that might actually go down quite well.
I don't think it will.
No?
I don't
Okay.
think, well, I don't think people are going to buy it. You know, she even had the annoying cackle that everybody really hates. So it's kind of shameless. You know, she's been a radical opponent of gun ownership and very much opposed to the Second Amendment, and yet she's trying to pivot. Now, I don't blame her for trying to pivot on some issues to the middle and try to appeal to independents and undecideds, but that's a little ridiculous.
So you think that whole thing that we just watched was fake?
Yeah, I think
it was phony. And when she laughed and said, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that," you think that was her acting?
There's definitely some acting here. Her whole campaign has been acting. I mean, she just really relies on platitudes and doesn't really discuss issues. Now, she didn't address the obvious, which is her past radical opposition to gun ownership, as well as Tim Walz. So she's got some baggage. I mean, she even recommended a few years ago, I think it was when she was running for president, that she endorsed going into people's homes to ensure that they sold guns if there's a required, gun sale program. I mean, and then of course Tim Walz is just as radical on gun ownership. It's a political loser for them. They would be better off just avoiding the topic.
Yeah, it is very odd that she's decided to come out as a gun owner and even explained how she would use her gun. I mean, how's this gone down with the gun-owning community?
I don't think that the gun-owning community is going to flip on that comment and vote for Kamala. I mean, and they're totally incoherent as well. So they're saying that we believe in gun ownership and we have guns. You know, Kamala says she has a handgun. Tim Walz says he has a handgun. But then they want to ban AR-15s and other sort of rifle weapons that are 25% of gun sales in the U.S. And people should be reminded that less than 1% of homicides are committed with assault rifles. Less than 5% are with rifles at all. So it's kind of hypocritical to say, I want to have my handgun when most of the handgun crime in America, or most of the gun crime, is from handguns. It's just incoherent.
Greg, is there not a world in which perhaps this is the real Kamala Harris?
I doubt it. I really doubt it. And if it is, it just shows how hypocritical she is. And that's one of the problems with the Democrats right now, is they're sort of the elite. You know, the rules are for thee, not for me. They also are aligned with this sort of lakefront liberal that likes to say, or limousine liberal, they like to say, oh, yeah, I'm against that. It sounds good at a cocktail party. But then if she does, in fact, have one again, which I doubt, it just shows the hypocrisy of it. Because they're all for gun control. And then all of a sudden, she's packing.
Not in my house.
I don't buy it.
Not in my house.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it there.
Great to
Greg
be here.
Swenson from
Thanks,
Republican Overseas. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. Speaking of interviews with Oprah Winfrey, one woman who's done her fair share is Meghan Markle. We've got an exclusive next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, I know we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
Will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, Omar, that happen. Children are the ones that are impacted. And, it's, for me, really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay, from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth, available at gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 2:50 and we're going to bring you a GB News exclusive on Meghan Markle. Yes, an insider working for Archewell, the not-for-profit organisation run by the Duchess of Sussex and Prince Harry, says quotes suggesting she's difficult are fabricated. OK, well, let's break this down with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, what's the story here?
Yeah, very interesting scoop by our GB News digital reporter, James Saunders here. But if you cast your mind back to 2018, when Meghan Markle started being a working member of the royal family, a couple of staffers alleged that she had bullying behaviour, and that prompted Buckingham Palace to launch an internal investigation. That investigation now concluded, but we know nothing else about it. If you remember, she allegedly was sending emails at 5 a.m. to staff demanding things. The Hollywood Reporter has now done a separate article speaking to unnamed sources, and they quote that everyone's terrified of Meghan still, she belittles people, and that she marches around like a dictator in high heels, fuming and barking orders. I've watched her reduce grown men to tears.
Goodness
That's what
me.
the Hollywood Reporter sources allege. But GB News has been speaking to some people very close to Meghan Markle. An unnamed source from Archewell, who wants to remain anonymous, says these quotes were fabricated by someone lacking knowledge of our company, because the Duke and Duchess work from Montecito, whereas we are based in Hollywood, which is clearly a different location. They likely think we're all in the same office and that this quote would fly, but the circumstances don't even allow for it. If she's marching around and barking orders, no Archewell employee could factually claim that. It's total nonsense. And they also say that regarding the emails, GB News, we have seen Meghan Markle's current email signature. You know, the thing at the end of your email which says who you work for, etc. And it says, and I quote, "My working day may not be your working day. Please do not feel obliged to reply to this email outside your normal working hours." So they seem to be refuting, sources close to Meghan Markle, the Duchess difficult term. But it's really interesting that we seem to be getting this kind of information. Usually it's a wall of silence.
Yeah, and they're usually a wall of silence when it comes to Meghan and Harry. But so essentially, Archewell are saying nothing to see here. She's absolutely lovely as a boss. She doesn't spend much time here anyway. And all of these sources are just a load of rubbish.
Exactly. Two sides to every story is what I would add. I think clearly those close to Meghan are going to be liking Meghan and wanting to defend her very well. Hollywood reporter sources, whoever they are, clearly have an agenda against Harry and Meghan. But remember, Buckingham Palace did launch an internal investigation into Meghan Markle. At the time, it was described by Meghan's lawyers as a calculated smear campaign. But this could be a situation where some of the staff working for Buckingham Palace, a bit of a culture clash. Perhaps she was American and Buckingham Palace clearly very British, very stiff upper lip. And now, of course, she's gone back to her hometown of America, Los Angeles, and different staff working for her. So it seems to be a little bit of two sides to this story, and it's quite hard to see exactly where the truth lies.
Yeah, it is, but you do notice just how many staffers they go through. Particularly senior ones. What was it, 18 staff?
Yes, we just had Josh Kettler, who was one of Harry's kind of chief advisors. He left in August just for the Columbia tour, and we've had a number of staff leave since Meghan and Harry left as working members of the royal family as well. But at the same time, there are a number of staff who clearly apparently feel happy to work for them still. So,
but she's she's not a dragon in Louboutins, according to these insiders.
Depends who you ask.
The difficult Duchess, or perhaps not. Perhaps she's the best boss ever. I'll let you decide at home. Thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker. And thanks for watching Good Afternoon Britain. Don't go anywhere, because it is Martin Daubney up next. I will actually be back on your screens on Sunday. I'm covering for Michael Portello, so see you then.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Much of the UK having a fine Friday, but we've already seen some thunderstorms and one or two more to come across the south this afternoon. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Not everywhere in the warning area will see a downpour, but where they occur, large hailstones, lots of lightning could cause some issues. They tend to fade as we go through this evening, but more could rumble into parts of the south during the early hours. A bit of drizzle is possible on some eastern coasts, but generally the weather's dry across the north, with clearer skies in the northwest, allowing temperatures to dip actually close to freezing in some rural spots. We have another Met Office yellow warning in place for Saturday as further thunderstorms develop. Again, hit and miss nature of the storms means that not everywhere in this warning area will catch a downpour, but where they occur tomorrow, they could cause some problems. Meanwhile, further north, the weather's much calmer, but still quite grey and drab on some of these North Sea coasts. Western Scotland, yes, it starts chilly, but here, the lion's share of the sunshine once more during Saturday. By and large, a fine day across Northern Ireland too. For England and Wales, there will be sunny spells, but there will also be these heavy showers. Parts of the Midlands, Wales, southern England in particular. Again, lots of lightning, large hailstones possible, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. But it won't rain all day, and some places may dodge the downpours altogether. And in the sunshine, quite warm here again, temperatures into the mid-20s, perhaps much cooler on some of these North Sea coasts where it stays drab with that breeze coming in. But quite warm again in western Scotland by day, quite cool again to start Sunday, but yet again here, another fine day. Again, in the south, another day of watching some heavy downpours. A yellow warning for Sunday. This is for rain at this time, or persistent, and potentially again causing some flooding after the weekend's downpours. There will again be some sunshine in western Scotland, and again in the south, temperatures may squeak over 20 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win a £36,000 secret salary in the latest Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Take a year off and keep it to yourself. You don't even need to tell the taxman, as it's totally tax-free. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232.